call the Board of Commissioners meeting for Monday, November 25th, 2024 to order. Would everyone join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I want to give notice that we did have an executive session prior to this meeting to discuss legal issues. Next, I have a few things to tend to. First is a proclamation for Small Business Saturday by the Board of Commissioners of Radnor Township, which states, whereas Radnor Township celebrates our local small businesses and the contributions they make to our local economy and community, and whereas, according to the United States Small Business Administration, there are 34.7 million small businesses in the United States, and small businesses represent 99.7% of firms with paid employees. Small businesses are responsible for 61.1% of net new jobs created since 1995. And small businesses employ 45.9% of the employees in the private sector in the United States. And whereas 68 cents of every dollar spent at a small business in the United States stays in the local community, and every dollar spent at a small business creates an additional 48 cents in local business activity as a result of employees and local businesses purchasing local goods and services. And whereas 59% of U.S. consumers aware of Small Business Saturday shopped or ate at a small independently owned retailer or restaurant on Small Business Saturday in 2023. And whereas Radnor, Pennsylvania supports our local businesses that create jobs, boost our local economy, and preserve our communities, and whereas advocacy groups as well as public and private organizations across the country have endorsed the Saturday after Thanksgiving as Small Business Saturday. Now, therefore, the Board of Commissioners of Radnor Township does hereby proclaim November 30th, 2024 as Small Business Saturday, and we urge the residents of our community and communities across the country to support small businesses and merchants on Small Business Saturday, celebrating its 15th year in 2024, and to shop small throughout the year. Resolved this 25th day of November 2024 AD by the Board of Commissioners of Radnor Township. Go Small Business Saturday. The second thing I want to draw your attention to is that I would like to make a motion authorizing free parking for the Wayne Business Association in downtown Wayne from Small Business Saturday, which is November 30, 2024, and every Saturday through the end of the year, December 31st, 2024. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Great. Now we're going to have a few presentations, and then we'll get to public participation. I know quite a few of you are here from there. Our first presentation is the Radnor 2035 Comprehensive Plan. This is the second section. We heard the first section before. Mr. Texa, I see you got through traffic.
I did get to do
Excellent.
traffic. Thank you very much. It was dicey there, but I made it.
Well, Commissioner Larkin is fighting it, so he'll get here when he can.
Are we perfect? Great. Thank you again for the opportunity to present the second of three presentations on the draft comprehensive plan. There we go. The agenda today is going to be very similar to the agenda for the last meeting. I'm going to walk through some of the foundations and the trends and conditions, giving a brief summary of what I talked about last time. If you are interested in that information in more detail, the presentation is available. And then I'm going to get into the next three elements: the historic preservation, business and economic development, and housing sections. There's a QR code up now. If you want to get a draft, if anybody in the audience hasn't yet seen it, you can go online onto Radnor 2035 and download parts 1 and 2, and actually parts 1, 2, and 3 should be available today. A quick overview. Remember that comprehensive planning is aspirational. We are looking at a 10-year vision for the community, and the plan itself is not a legal document. It gives policy guidance to the township, but in and of itself, it does not change any laws or enact any actions. It's presented as a framework with a vision, goals, and then a series of strategies and actions for each element. And as I said earlier, today I'm going to be talking about three sections or elements: the historic preservation, business and economic development, and housing. This is the second of three. The final presentation is going to be on December 9th, where we're going to talk about mobility, institutions, and land use. And then, as I discussed last time, we're going to go through a formal adoption process in 2025. I'm not going to go into the depths of this conversation before, but just a reminder that we've been at this for about a year and a half. We've done a lot of work in developing the plan recommendations, all of which is available on Radnor 2035. There's presentations, there's recordings, there's PDFs of the presentations, and there's summaries and reports. And you can watch my presentation from last week to learn a little bit more as well. A reminder that there are 3 or 4 ways that comprehensive plans are implemented. One of them is through regulatory changes. Another way is through capital investments, so investments in infrastructure, either through municipal funding or grants, or by your sort of regional partners, through partnerships and advocacy, and through additional planning and studying. Last time I gave an overview of the community engagement work that we did. It was organized into these 4 categories: connect, listen and learn, collaborate, and refine. As you can see, we did a lot of engagement throughout all of this process, and we're going to continue to engage with people through the comment process on this planning document. So I'm going to start with the conversation about historic preservation. When we did our sort of existing conditions and trends analysis, one of the things that we found is that Radnor has what I'm calling sort of dispersed documentation of historic resources. You can see here there are sort of been 5 efforts at the local and the county level to try to document where there are or could potentially be historic assets. You can see the map here with all the red dots there. They are out there. There's been a lot of work that's been done there, but there's been no effort to sort of consolidate all of those efforts and move that through a formal process of evaluation to determine whether or not those properties are in fact historic. The other thing that we heard a lot from stakeholders and from the public is a question about why should you even protect historic properties? It seemed like there was a big question mark out there. It's like, why is this even a good thing? Why is this even a benefit? And so one of the things that you'll see in this planning recommendations is a need to establish and a way of establishing a better foundation for why. And then you had a very good framework from your last comprehensive plan about implementing historic preservation. And we've carried a lot of that forward, updating a lot of that with sort of current standards. So we established 2 goals based on public input. The first was focused around protecting, promoting, and celebrating your historic resources. And the second was about telling an inclusive history. That's a complete history of Radnor that includes all the different populations that have had an impact on the community. The historic preservation strategies that I want to focus on are start with these 3. So The first series of actions, so the first strategy, is all about establishing a foundation here. So that includes doing things like establishing an advisory group that can help you move through this process, becoming a certified local government with the state, which gives you access to funding to support your efforts, doing education, and then I want to talk about this fourth bullet here, establishing local criteria. So I think it's always important to recognize that you should be protecting resources that are connected to Radnor's important history and Radnor's important values. And the way that I think about that a little bit is I've got a 1920s row home that I live in, okay? It's a great resource. But you know what? There are about 1 million other of those resources all around me, right? If mine disappears, the story of Philadelphia and the story of row homes doesn't disappear. If somebody important lived in my home, unfortunately nobody has. It's just been, everyday folks like myself. Maybe that's a reason to protect that resource. If it were designed maybe by a famous architect, that might be, or somebody locally relevant, that might be a reason to protect it. But it needs to be fundamentally tied to the story of the place in which that asset is located. And so it's really important to establish that local criteria before you start going off on starting to designate all of these assets. Otherwise, you're just trying to grab at criteria that maybe Denver uses that isn't relative to, that Philadelphia maybe uses that isn't relative to Radnor. And that's also a really great opportunity for you to start telling some of your history and your stories and learning a little bit more about the diverse set of stories that have impacted Radnor's environment. And then going through the process of conducting field surveys, developing plan, and going after those grants. The ordinance updates are really a sort of second tier to that. So once you've gone through that process and you've identified your resources, you can go out and start protecting those resources through legislative changes. One thing that you should be looking at is a scattered site ordinance. It's not something that is unique in the region, and it allows you to look at areas outside of your currently designated historic districts as places that may be worth protecting. And then finally, really partnering. And we've given some suggestions here about ways that you can partner. Maybe it's with the schools in your community, both the local schools, but maybe your institutional schools here, to tell a more complete story. You've got a lot of resources there. And in fact, I think it's important to recognize that the League of Women Voters was one of the first entities that went out and did your historic asset documentation. So partnerships are really critical here. In terms of business and economic development, again, just sort of going back to some of the key foundations here, it's important to remember that you have three core drivers of your economy. You've got your educational institutions, which are major employers here. You have a number of professional, scientific, finance, and insurance companies that call Radnor home. And you have a number of people who are sort of employed in those industries. And then you have really the Route 30 corridor, including very much the Wayne Business District as key drivers. It is really important, and I don't need to tell all of you this, but it's important to say that Act 51 taxes generate about 32% of the township revenues. That means that your businesses are contributing about 1/3 of the revenue, and that is a huge opportunity because it really helps to offset the cost of maintaining your services to residents. 65% of the office land is owned by Brandywine Realty. That's really critical. It's all in that Radnor Station area. One finding here that was a little surprising to me, honestly, I came into this expecting the office market in the area to be pretty shaky, given everything that's going on. All the indications are that it's doing much better than the rest of the region. That said, I don't think would be responsible to say that everybody knows where the office market is going over the next 10 years. There could be some big changes here, and really paying attention to that and staying on top of that is going to be really important. Again, going back to the fact that 32% of the township revenues are coming from your businesses. So the other thing that I think this image is forever going to live in my heart because I think it so accurately represents where people's concerns are. So this is the survey results where we asked people to put pins about where they wanted to see changes or improvements. And you can see there's that big red glowing dot right around Wayne. Wayne, despite what many people think, only 8% of the businesses are in the food services and drinking places. Those places are very visible, but they are not all of your businesses in that area. But you do have a very concentrated retail market, and about 40% are sort of in those two classifications. So taking all that into consideration and the public feedback that we got, we came up with these 3 goals. That the township needs to be proactive about attracting businesses and sharing community value, Radnor's community values. Really putting a focus on Wayne and supporting and growing that, supporting small commercial activity, making sure that your office market stays strong, supporting Route 30. It's really a way to think about it is it's sort of the front door to your community for a lot of people who travel through the region. Route 30 is the only thing that they see about Radnor. That's the only thing that they know. They never move off of that. And so that's the image that they have of your community in their mind. And then making sure that you remember to sort of maintain that tax base as you move forward. So the strategies are really focused on a couple of key topics. The first one is the Downtown Wayne Master Plan, which we're going to be really excited to get started on in 2025. This is the planning effort that you got $100,000 from DVRPC through their TCDI grant. So that's a really great opportunity where we're going to be partnering with SEPTA and PennDOT and all the different regional entities to really come up with a plan to improve Wayne. The second thing that we're recommending here is that you build some local capacity. The first recommendation here is hiring an economic development manager. And the second one is to sort of leverage state initiatives. So for those who haven't been paying close attention, Shapiro has come out with a 10-year economic development plan. It's the first economic development plan in a very long time at the state level. And it's identifying sectors or identifying places where the state is going to be making investment. And if you can see there that life science, robotics, and technology very much aligns with those key industries that we talked about are sort of a driving of Radnor's economic base. So being able to leverage those state resources to support your local economy is a really great opportunity. There's opportunities through the state to support historically disadvantaged businesses and focus on regional hubs, which Radnor really is considered a regional hub. But one thing that I wanted to do a little bit is talk to you about this economic development manager because I know it was a part of a conversation about the 2025 budget. One of the things that I did is I just kind of wanted to give you an overview of approaches to building local capacity around economic development. And I actually want to start with the middle column there, those authorities or corporations. So there are a number of communities in your region. So Media, Lansdowne, and Haverford all have authorities or corporations. And what these are semi-governmental organizations. Very frequently, they cover a specific geography, and businesses or the township pay into a fund that supports their efforts. These work very well when you have a very concentrated business climate, so like in Lansdowne or Media, where all your businesses are essentially located in a relatively compact geography. Because that authority or that corporation can serve those businesses. They get a little bit tricky because depending on who's paying into those services, there becomes a little bit of a question of like, who is that business person serving? Are they serving all of the township's interests, or are they serving just the interests of the business owners who are supporting that corporation or that entity? Places like Lower Marion, Upper Marion, and Phoenixville have departments that are planning and development departments, and they sort of serve as a mixture of planning work, so some of the things like we're doing now, economic development, and development as in land development services. And then along with that, many communities have committees that are, resident staffed committees that help support those efforts. So you can see Lower Merion and Upper Merion both have planning and development departments and committees. But one thing that I wanted to do is recognize that Radnor is a very unique situation in some ways in the area because of its size. You are right at this sort of strange or awkward size where you're not a Philadelphia, right? You're not building this huge infrastructure when it comes to supporting economic development, but you're also not a small Swarthmore. You're not 6,000 people, right? You need and you have needs beyond what a smaller community can do. So what I did is I looked at 3 communities that are very similar in size to Radnor in Lehigh and 2 in Allegheny, and just looked at what they were doing. So you're not going to force me to pronounce that name, Lower something, in Lehigh. I'm showing my non-native roots there. It's got a community and economic development department. So they have a whole department that is focused on community and economic development. Mount Lebanon has got this commercial districts and economic development office, again, sort of a department or a staff that's working there. And Bethel has got an economic development committee. So you can see that as you start to get to your size, you tend a little bit more towards having staff in-house that is able to support these efforts. Going on, there are 2 strategies that I think are just really important to remember, that enhancing the Route 30 corridor is really critical. I think this strategy is a really great example of how an economic development strategy can be supported by actions from other elements or other sections. So, we've recommended in the mobility element to develop an access management program, to do a Route 30 study, and develop design standards, all which would improve the economic conditions along Route 30, but aren't specifically economic development strategies, if that makes sense. They're not specifically tied to economic development, but they should incorporate or think about the economic development impacts as they go through implementation. And then the other one is to proactively plan for office changes. I think anybody would be crazy to say they know where the office market is going to be in 10 years. It is certainly going to change. It is going to go through a process. We're seeing that happen right now. And as you go through your zoning update, really thinking about what some of those office uses could transition into, how could you support the movement of those offices into other productive uses so that you don't end up having a zoning ordinance that unnecessarily constricts those uses from transitioning, creating vacancies, creating dilapidated structures, places that aren't able to move forward. The final section that I want to talk about today is housing. I'm just going to walk through again some of the existing conditions. There was a lot of conversation about housing through this process. One thing to remember, and I think is great, is that Radnor's got a really diverse housing stock. So you can see here, a lot of housing that was built in that sort of 1960s to 1979 era, but not all of it, and not a majority of it. You really do have a diversity of housing in the community. I think this will always surprise people who think sort of just of Radnor generically, that I think most people probably think of Radnor as a single-family detached home community. The reality is about a third of the units in the community are multifamily. And about 12% of them are in buildings of 50 or larger. But there's a lot of these sort of 2, 3 to 9 unit buildings that are scattered throughout the community. The interesting thing that over the last 10 years, you have seen a transition to more married couple families in the community and more families in general. I think it is notable that what you have been losing over the last 10 years is people living alone. And we've had a lot of conversations about why that might be happening. But I think one of the drivers of that is sort of the housing price costs and the how expensive it can be to live in Radnor or afford a home in Radnor. As a reminder, Radnor, unlike most of its other sort of counterparts, and actually more than the county in general, does include a substantial renter population. About a third of households in Radnor are renters. I think that gives you a really great foundation. A lot of those renters are future homeowners. They're people who are coming into your community. It gives you an access point that a lot of other communities don't have. Again, when we talk about married couple families who rent, they have really moved in, or excuse me, those married couples have really moved into the rental market. So sometimes people think of renters as singles, maybe they're older people, maybe they're younger people. Those married couple families increased. There were almost 580 more households over the past 10 years that are renting in that category. And they went from being 21% of renters to 40% of all renters. So this idea that your renter population are again single, younger or older is starting to change. The other thing that we've talked a lot about is just the change in housing costs. And I think one of the things to notice that in 2000, about the time when you wrote your last comprehensive plan, more than a third of more than a third of occupied housing was valued at under $250,000. That's now dropped to 7%, right? A substantial decrease. And you've seen big increases in the number of housing units that are valued over $750,000. Now, the only thing that I want to just caveat around all of this is that the census doesn't adjust these numbers for inflation. So there has been inflation over that time, and so you naturally see a sort of movement down on those numbers. But if you look at the monthly cost of owning a home, and these are inflation-adjusted numbers, in 2000, you were about $1,100, $1,200 above what the state was, okay? And just a little bit less above where the county was. One of the things that you're seeing is that housing prices across the state and across the county are going up, so you're not alone, but you're outpacing the costs of other communities in the county and in the state. So it is something to really pay attention to, and you have seen a 57% increase in the median cost of housing over that a 20-year period, and that again is inflation adjusted. And the result of that is that you have gotten more households who are what are called cost burden households, and those are households that are paying more than 30% of their income on household costs. I think what's really interesting about this information is that clearly the 2008 recession had a big impact on household finances, and you're actually seeing some correction. So in 2010, there were a lot more households that were cost burden than there are today, but you're getting more cost burden households than there were in 2000. So the trend is coming back a little bit from 2010, which was clearly a difficult time, but it's still very high. And clearly one of the things to pay attention to there is half of all your renters are cost burden. And about a third of all your homeowners with a mortgage are cost burden. This is not unique and something we've talked a lot about. So this is the sale price of median household, the sale price to median household income nationally. And what you can just tell is in the past several years, we've seen a real spike in the cost of housing. And there's a lot of reasons for that we can get into if we need to. One other thing that I want you all to be paying attention to is Radnor is kind of an ideal community for the work from home population. Work from home is really well suited to professionals. It's really well suited to people who have higher education, who tend to be in sort of upper management. They're not looking for everyday supervision. And so one of the things that you see from 2010 to 2020 is a real reduction in the number of people who are driving to work and a huge spike in the number of people who are working from home. That's going to have big impacts all over the place. It's going to impact housing allocation, right? People are going to be looking for maybe homes with an office, homes with a den, places that you can do that, things like that. But it's also going to change things like your traffic patterns, right? With less people driving to work, typically on Monday and Friday, you get less traffic on the road. You may have less parking demand in certain areas, and you may need to start to think about adjusting what you require businesses to provide in terms of parking. And it's always important to remember that a big percentage of those people are all traveling into Philadelphia. And so to the extent that the SEPTA network is improved and invested, that's also going to make a big difference in a lot of these mode shares. So that's a lot of background just to sort of set the foundation for the fact that there were many goals from the community feedback. A big part of it was protecting sort of the core residential neighborhoods, the established residential neighborhoods, focusing growth away from those areas and to places where it's going to have least impact, balancing your redevelopment pressure in certain areas with what residents in those areas want to see happen, implementing context-sensitive design, which I'll talk a little bit more about, which is basically making sure that new development supports and contributes to the existing context. Radnor, in many ways, is done building out. You don't have a lot of green space. Most of your growth and most of your change going forward now is going to come through redevelopment. So paying very close attention to how that development interacts with its neighbors is going to be an increasingly important issue. Reducing the impact of new housing growth, making sure that housing is accessible, and partnering with your regional partners to make sure that you understand the impact and you can influence policy at a regional level. One thing that doesn't or is important to keep in mind is you are sort of a modest-sized boat in a very, very big ocean of housing. What happens in your surrounding communities in terms of their housing policy is going to impact you. You're going to impact them. Collaborating and working with them is going to be a really important part of this. I do want to say that we did make a revision to one of these goals since the last part one went out, and that's this accessible one. So we revised it to say the township will promote a balanced housing market that includes affordable housing options for households at all income levels. The previous goal said the township will encourage housing that is affordable to moderate income households. This was really based on the fact that I was reading these goals, I was reflecting on the community input, and I was thinking a little bit about implementation. And I was recognizing that the goal that we had written originally wasn't inclusive enough. It didn't talk about all the different types of affordable housing for all the different populations that you have in this community. And it was really too focused on moderate income households and really need to include all income households. So the strategy that we're putting out and putting forward today is really important to think about holistically. I'm talking about it as a set of interconnected recommendations. In some of the other elements or some of the other areas, we've talked about sort of strategies that can be implemented independent of one another. They support one another, obviously, but they can be advanced a little bit independently. These all really work together. Because of the interrelationship of housing, if you try to advance one of them and you don't advance the other one, you're really going to detract from your sort of core goals. So an example of this is updating zoning to protect established neighborhoods. If you just go ahead with that strategy and you say, you know what, we're just going to update zoning to protect our established neighborhoods and we're not going to do all the rest, what you're essentially going to do is tighten down the housing market and make it really difficult for you to be able to provide the gaps in the housing market that currently exist. That's going to increase costs for people, so it's going to exacerbate some of the trends that we've seen already. And it's going to make it more likely, quite frankly, that you're going to get a lot of pushback on your zoning ordinance. Developers, property owners are going to come in and they're going to try to find ways to meet the market demand, and you're going to get a lot of use variance applications, bulk variance applications of people trying to make it work, even though, because the market's there, the demand is there. They know that these things are not unique to a sort of comprehensive planning effort. They're very sophisticated. So that's why we've really talked about directing new housing to lower impact areas, I do want to emphasize that this is part of a strategy that I think is very closely tied to how Radnor has always done its housing policy. I really find the density modification, Kevin, don't kill me on this one, a really interesting strategy. It was an approach to try to protect open space as part of the land development and subdivision process. And it worked. You have parts of this community that are slightly denser, but where you have open space preservation. And as you were developing your quote unquote greenfield areas, that made a lot of sense. You're now sort of past that era, and now you need to be starting to think about, well, where are we going to develop in areas that are going to have the least impact on our neighborhoods? And that's some of those areas that are highlighted in red there. So it's the areas around your train stations, mostly, and it's areas in sort of commercial areas or places where you don't have established neighborhoods that you can direct growth, where you can start to build some of the housing that people need without substantially impacting your existing housing stock. That ties into that supporting the construction of more diverse housing. We've identified a number of neighborhoods where we think that there's going to be change that's going to happen over the next 10 years, and there is no one single right answer for these areas. Every action that you take, including not doing anything, including leaving your zoning exactly the way it is going to have an impact. And so what we're recommending is that you work with the neighbors in those communities to understand the conditions and develop essentially solutions that meet the needs of those communities based on the specific conditions there, and not based on a sort of larger township-wide, more broad blanket or broad strokes approach. And then, continue to establish those partnerships and move things forward. I know I'm going a little long, so I'm just going to move somewhat quickly through these slides. There is this concept of missing middle housing that I think everybody should start to get very familiar with. If you haven't heard it before, you're going to start reading about it a lot. It's this idea that in the United States generally and in our region, we have basically built two types of housing: large multifamily developments and single-family detached neighborhoods. And we have not built much in between, at least not in the past 50 or 60 years. If you go into a lot of historic areas, and Radnor actually has some of those, you'll see that there are neighborhoods where you have a mix of 1, 2, maybe 4 unit housing, all in the same area. It's not so strictly big multifamily, single family detached. And what I've done is included some examples down here, and I can provide more, of some housing that looks in many ways very single family in its configuration, but has an opportunity to provide housing that is more diverse, that meets the needs of a more diverse population, and maybe starts to ebb away a little bit at some of those affordability issues. So in the lower left-hand corner, you see sort of what's like a fourplex, right? So those are 4 units, are built around a little courtyard, townhomes in the second one, which you all have in Radnor. And then that third one is sort of a duplex, but there's actually a third unit in the back, and you can see the space for the 3 little garages there. The other thing that is recommended in this, and we'll talk a little bit more in the land use section, is hybrid form-based zoning. It's something that's increasingly becoming popular in communities like yours, where context is very critical. Euclidean zoning is what you all have right now. It does not come from Euclidean as in geometry. It comes from Euclid as in the place in Ohio, where zoning was like originally legalized. But it's basically the zoning that you all have now, which says you can do this and you can put it in this box. And as long as you fit it inside of the box, right? As long as you're inside the setbacks and inside the building height, it can be whatever you want. You want to make it, a castle that fits in that box? Great, you can build a castle. You want to build a mid-century modern revival? Put it in the box, it fits, great. Doesn't matter what happens with your neighbors, doesn't matter if it fits in with your neighborhood, we don't care. That's how it works. Form standards are a little bit different. Form standards say, okay, we're not just going to give you a box. We're going to give you a shape that you need to conform with. And that shape needs to generally align, typically the way it's done, with your neighbors. And you do studies on the neighborhood and the character, and you use that to inform the regulations around shape. The big thing that is different about form standards than, for example, style standards or design guidelines is it is not an attempt to dictate a style. So if you're a little bit more modernly inclined, if you're a little bit more classically inclined, you can do those things. It's not trying to say you can't do this style or you can't do that style of architecture, but it's saying that your building has to complement the surrounding area. So a really great example of this might be a block in which all the front yards are exactly the same depth or just about the same depth, and where everybody has porches. Okay, a form would say that you need to have a porch and that you need to be set back, you need to have that same front yard. It would say that what you cannot do is, for example, build a building that's 50 feet behind that, so have some really large front yard, or some really short front yard that sort of sticks out like a sore thumb along the block, and put a garage out front so that it looks very different than all your neighbors. That's really the core of what form-based code zoning is. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Just a reminder that I will be back on December 9th. We are encouraging everybody to get their comments in. You can go to radnor2035.com/comments. You can upload your comments if you want to comment on the PDF itself, or you can just fill in the form and answer the questions. We're asking, I think, everybody to have comments in by December 16th so that we can get a final draft done by the end of this year and be ready for adoption next year. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and otherwise, just thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
Great.
I do have one question.
Yeah.
When you were looking at other areas, Lower Merion, Upper Merion, do they have planning? Do they have economic development person?
Yeah.
If you looked at us on paper,
Yeah.
and you weren't here, I mean,
Yeah.
digging,
Yeah.
you would see community development and a planning commission.
Yeah.
Would we, I mean, how would we have stacked up looking like that? Like, I guess I'm just a little confused in the way you had it out there. It seemed like they didn't have anything we didn't have, really.
Yeah, well,
And I'm not sure I believe what I'm saying. I'm just...
Yeah, no, it's a very good question. I mean, I think that the economic development sort of position, and I'm not going to go back and do that, is I think, somewhat unique for the area around you, okay? It's not so unique for communities of your size. So we looked at Allegheny and, we looked at some of those places. I think one of the key things about Radnor is that 30% or 32% of your revenues, right, your tax revenues that are coming from your business privilege tax. That is such a core part of your income that you're bringing in that supporting those businesses, making sure that they grow and developing them, seems to me like a very core part of your sort of sustainability as a community. That is not the case, for example, for Swarthmore or Amedio or some of those places. So I think it is a little bit unique in your area, but it's not, I don't think, unique for a community of your size. I hope that answers your question.
It did, thanks.
Yeah.
Other questions? Comments for Adam? No, thank you.
Great, thank you very
Excellent
much. I
summary.
look forward to coming back on December 9th.
Good. All right. Moving on, we're going to open up public participation. So if anyone wants to speak, you get 5 minutes by the clock. I will give you one finger when you have 1 minute left. Come to the podium, give your name, your affiliation, or your street, and have at it.
Hello, Ken Kearns, on behalf of the Women's Association, I want to say thank you for the parking concessions for the community for the month of December. It's very important to the local businesses, and we, as always, appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you. That was definitely less than 5 minutes. Anyone else?
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Jennifer Beacom. I live at 332 South Devon Avenue, and we live right on Philippone Park. And most of you actually know me as the president of the Radnor Historical Society. You're all shaking your head, good. But what I'm going to say tonight is not an official Historical Society comment. It's more of a comments between myself and some of my society colleagues who got together and reviewed the plan. As you may already know, several of our board members were more than happy to assist with the comprehensive plan brainstorming process that was talked about a few minutes ago, because we have a particular interest in the historic preservation chapter of the plan. While we are very encouraged by this draft, we have compiled a number of comments which have been submitted via the website. And I'm not going to go through the comments. Rather than doing that, I encourage all of you, on behalf of my colleagues, to carefully consider the recommendations in the plan as it is finalized. If you want me to send it to you personally, president@radnorhistory.org, shoot me an email and I'll get it to you tomorrow. To quote Richard Beringer, the former secretary of the Township, in his 1951 address celebrating the 50th anniversary of Radnor becoming a first-class township, Radnor Township's story has been an orderly, peaceful evolution in which the good neighbor strove to remain also the good friend. And I think that answers the why in the question before. Why is it important? Because we have a good history in our township. I'd like to thank you for your understanding of the importance of historic preservation and for the opportunity to address you this evening.
Thank you very much. Anyone else?
Hi,
Welcome.
my name is Tom Rogers. My address is 712 Woodcrest Circle in Radnor. My property backs up to Cabrini's property, specifically the access road off of King of Prussia. Last Wednesday night, Villanova made a presentation to the local community on their plan to convert the Cabrini campus into an extension of Villanova. 900 to 1,000 students will be living on this campus. They also plan to run a bus service so that the students from Villanova campus can attend classes at the Cabrini, now Wayne campus, and the students at Cabrini can attend classes at Villanova and vice versa. To accomplish this, they plan to run 6 buses starting from Villanova Road, coming down the county line, making a left-hand turn onto Massenford, then make a right-hand turn onto King of Prussia, and then a left-hand turn onto the access road. That means, and they plan to run 6 buses, and the round trip takes about a half hour. With 6 buses running every half hour, that means that every 5 minutes, a bus will be turning off of King of Prussia Road onto the access road, and then turning around and turning back onto the King of Prussia Road, making a return trip back to Villanova. This will continue for a day starting from 6:30 in the morning till 10 o'clock at night. That also means between 4 and 6, where there's a traffic jam on King of Prussia, there's going to be a lot of problems. The problem is the edge of my property adjoins Cabrini, that is 15 yards from the access road. That means my family and I will not only be seeing and hearing these buses, but also the size of the buses is going to be about a little less than the size of a SEPTA bus. So there'll also be smelling as well as the exhaust fumes from the buses, which we really don't appreciate, nor do the neighbors appreciate. But our suggestion is, which we're going to make a presentation to Villanova to do, was that the intersection between Eagle Road and King of Prussia is designed to make left-hand turns and right-hand turns. So when the buses come up from Madisonford up to King of Prussia, they can make a left-hand turn onto Eagle and go up to the access road, which goes up to Cabrini right across from Fenimore Woods, and then go back that way. The problem is, as a resident here for 32 years, I don't want to be seeing buses going up and down the access road off of King of Prussia every 5 minutes from 6:30 in the morning to 10:30 at night. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Hello.
Good evening, Commissioners. So my name is Zach Hurst, and I come here in my capacity as a resident of Radnor Township. And after going through the draft plan, I did just want to say that I commend the efforts of going through and drafting this comprehensive plan. I know it's an immense amount of work and a lot of planning that goes into it. And I do want to offer my support for the efforts and strategies provided regarding the historical preservation ordinances and support for that. I do think it's very important here in a township, especially as we face growing development pressures. And I'm willing to offer my advocacy and also just my willingness to help as a dedicated Radnor Township resident to actually put these into place and to ensure that these strategies are successful. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Adam, take him up on that. Yeah. All right, anyone else? Welcome, Radnor Fire Department.
Thank you. My name's Brian Zimmerman. I'm the Executive Director for Radnor Fire Company. I'm here on behalf of the volunteers and the career staff, both EMS and fire, of the Radnor Fire Company. We wanted to thank the commissioners for their continued support. Like many other fire companies, Radnor Fire Company faces significant challenges ahead with decreasing volunteerism, increasing call volumes, and apparatus equipment costs that are significantly increased over the last 10 years. These aren't just local issues, but national issues as well. Radnor Fire Company is fortunate to have an excellent working relationship with the commissioners and township staff. Through this relationship, Radnor Fire Company has engaged the Board of Commissioners, and we are fortunate to have Commissioner Maroney and Commissioner Larkin attend our Board of Directors meetings. Collaboration like this ensures the best possible emergency services for the residents, businesses, and visitors of Radnor Township. Radnor Fire Company is optimistic about overcoming these challenges with this collaborative effort. Again, thank you guys for your continued support.
Thank you for all you do, all of you. Hello.
Good evening. My name is Joyce Platfoot, and I'm the Executive Director of the library. And I just really wanted to come and thank the Township for your support in helping us get a new shingled roof at the library. It is now complete. It was completed before the election. And I wanted to thank the engineering department and all the support they provided, and Melissa Kahn with the grant. Half of the cost of this project was supported by a Keystone grant to facilitate library facilities. So I'm just really pleased that everything is safe in the library. I also wanted to extend an invitation to everybody. We have our biggest fundraiser of the year coming up in 2 weeks, the weekend of the Christmas in Wayne activities. Our Elves for the Shelves 5K race and fun run is happening. We have over 450 people already registered, which is very exciting. And of course, all the proceeds benefit the library directly, so everybody is welcome to attend. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Seeing none, we will move on to the consent agenda. Is there any item on the consent agenda that a commissioner or a member of the public would like to pull?
Item B.
Item B. Hold on, let me grab my pen. Anything else? Nope. Let's start with item B, approval of the 2025 Township holiday schedule. Could I have a motion, please? And a second? Okay. Commissioner Abel?
Yeah. Bill, would you take lead on this?
I will.
So how many holidays are listed? Is it 11? Maybe 12? I mean, but 14?
14,
Okay.
including a couple half-days, so,
But Veterans Day is not listed on there, is it?
No.
no.
And why is that?
So how this list of holidays have come together over time is through collective bargaining with the unionized staff. And these are the ones that the township and the two unions that, the rate union and the FOP, have come together with the township on. So I'm not exactly sure why some are there and some aren't. I don't have all the history there. Yeah, but that's the source of the holidays.
Okay. When is that negotiation up again?
I think we're in year 2 of 5, so we've got a few years until they both expire.
All right. Yeah, I mean, during the next round, I mean, I'd like to see Veterans Day on there. I mean, there's a couple that I think would be good trade-offs, but not giving Veterans Day off is, you know, I get concerned when I'm in a job that doesn't give it off. I think that should be, it's a federal holiday. I think everybody should have that day off.
Thank you. Any other commissioner comments, questions? Any public comment on this item? Seeing none, we are going to vote to approve the 2025 Township holiday schedule. All in favor? Aye. It's unanimous, with Commissioner Larkin off the dais. Okay, the remainder of the consent agenda, items A, C, D, E, F, and G. Could I have a motion for those, please? And a second. All right. I guess we'll just vote for approval. All in favor? Aye. Unanimous with Commissioner Larkin off the dais. All right, move on to the business agenda. Item A is Resolution 2024-138, authorization to award construction contract B-24-003 for the Willows Park paving project to Marino Corporation to include contingency, construction, inspection, and administration costs, and the total amount of $535,000, $535,614.13, to be funded by the general fund allocation under the requirements of the lease agreement with the Willows Park Preserve. Could I have a motion, please? So moved. And a second? Seconded by Commissioner Riley. Mr. Norsini?
Thank you, Madam President. So yes, this in parts is a road reconstruction of the Willows. It's been a few decades. We work with Tammy Cohen on the scheduling as well as the phasing, as well as the WPP. So we are hoping that you will award this tonight for a long, long overdue project.
Any commissioner discussion? Commissioner Mulroney?
Yeah, I do have a question. Can you describe kind of the path and how far it goes? Like how close to the
Sure. So
house?
let's take it from the entrance. So from the entrance past the cottage all the way up to the next intersection, that road will be reconstructed. From the exit to that same point, that road will be reconstructed. The parking lot, as it sits, will not be reconstructed. It will be milled and paved like we do most roads. And in this contract, we are requesting to have what we call the courtyard of the WPP paved also.
So that would be from the parking lot up the driveway.
And around the well and all that
And
good
around the
stuff.
well is included in this project?
Yes, ma'am.
You got my vote. Thank you.
You're easy. Any other commissioner comments? When you say it has to be sort of reconstructed, you mean you're digging down to the dirt again? Or you're not just milling a layer
That
off?
is correct.
You're going all the way down and starting with the bases and the rocks and all?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? No?
And Steve, what's the funding source?
That would be the Willows Enterprise Fund.
So it's coming from the 1.6?
That is correct.
Yes.
So what's the current balance?
We have a little bit over 800,000 that's still available.
Okay. So this will, so I mean, we're going to be around like 250 after this project is over, 250, 300?
Yeah, we'll be in that window. I mean, we always qualify that with the opportunity for change orders. Hopefully that this one has as little as possible. We do have some contingency in there, but yeah, at the end of this, we're hoping to be in that window.
Okay, and at the last meeting, the WPP had indicated that they would be back before the board in 2025 to talk about a project. Do we have any insight on what that discussion is going to be about?
I don't think, I'm Steve and I are making eye contact. I don't think either of us do.
I don't know, Commissioner. I don't have any.
Okay. All right, thank you.
So, I whisper, Commissioner O'Reilly whispered in my ear and gave me another question. There is an issue with that driveway during evening events. The driveway to the Willows is not lit. Is there any effort in this project to get some lighting so that people who walk that path are safe?
There is none in this project. This was solely a pavement reconstruction and resurfacing project, but we can look into that if that's the will of the board.
I don't want it to hold up any approval, but, sometimes there's embedded lights, so I would hate to, pave that driveway and then come back and say that would be the best solution. So maybe looking into it and providing us some information.
We have a little time because it's a spring project.
Yeah.
It's going to be spring 2025. So you're talking about like lighted bollards or street lights?
Yeah, I think it's, sort of ground lighting. When they have events now, they put, sort of temporary lights that some work and some don't. They do a good effort to try to guide people up that path, but when there are no lights there at night, it's very dark along that path.
We'll
So if
get
there was
right
to
on
be
it.
some permanent lighting, at least do
We'll-
some research,
We'll get right on it with all the parties and see what we can come up with.
that'd be great. Thank you.
Any further, go ahead.
And one more question. I thought I was going to be the easy one. The wall, that's separate. The wall at the entrance to the Willows. I know it's been painted and it looks nicer, but it's still, and I know the Ironary neighbors also look at it every day and have some thoughts about it. Is that I understand is not in this project. Are there efforts to do some improvements on that wall? Any plans for that?
Commissioner, I can comment on that, yes. So even though that's not part of this project, it's definitely something that I'm looking into and working with all the parties as well, and perhaps we can even integrate that into the lighting considerations, because there might be lighting at the entrance as well that could be, integrated as part of that. But my goal is to get some of the groups together. I know that there's been some efforts for the historic registry as well, recognizing that there is some consistency that we're going to want to build in with that, and to restore it to its historical look and feel. So that will be getting underway concurrent to this.
Any other commissioner questions? No? Fine. Any public participation on this issue? Seeing none, I'm going to call a vote on Resolution 2024-138. All in favor? Aye. Unanimous with Commissioner Larkin off the dais. All right. Got to find my glasses. Item B, Resolution 2024-139, authorization to award construction contract B-24-004 for the Conestoga Road and South Devon Avenue Rectangular Rapid Flashing Beacon Project to Marino Corporation to include contingency and construction, inspection, and administration costs in the total amount of $174,155 to be funded from the proceeds of the 2019 general obligation bond. Could I have a motion, please? And a second? All right. Mr. Norsini.
Thank you, Madam President. Pretty straightforward. This was a project that was bid previously and has been rebid and is now funded. And we're requesting that this is authorized award to Marino. This, too, will be a spring project and in the amount of $174,155.
Thank you. Any commissioner comment? Commissioner Abel, this is a pet project of yours.
It is. Hey, Steve, when it kicks off, like, timeframe, weather pending?
So if this is awarded tonight, we'll meet with the contractor and start to get an idea of schedule for lead time of the actual rectangular rapid flashing beacon. So the intent is to get this done, May, spring.
Okay.
I'll have a better idea in about 3 weeks.
Does it shut down the whole intersection when the project's ongoing?
Now, there'll be lane restrictions, and there may be temporary shutdowns, but they're mainly lane restrictions, and that's all part of the, that's all on the plan set. It's a PennDOT road, so we follow their detour requirements.
Okay. School buses will still be able to access?
We'll get them through.
Okay.
Any further commissioner comments or questions? Any public participation on this issue? Seeing none, I'm going to call a vote on Resolution 2024-139. All in favor? Aye. Unanimous. Okay, next is item C, Resolution 2024-137, authorizing the execution of a grant application to the Pennsylvania Department of Community and Economic Development statewide local share account, statewide grant program in support of the Wayne Art Center's request for the Second Century Land Acquisition Project not to exceed $1 million. Could I have a motion, please? So moved. And a second? Second by Commissioner Riley. Mr. Tate?
Thank you, Madam President. The resolution tonight, the township is asking the board's permission to apply for this Commonwealth Financing Authority's local share account grant. As a municipality, the township is an eligible applicant, and the Wayne Art Center is an eligible institution who can apply through the municipality. So tonight's resolution is permission for the township to apply on behalf of the Wayne Art Center, seeking a grant amount not to exceed $1 million in support of their expansion plans to support their increasing programmatic and their parking needs at their location. Specifically, there's an adjacent 2-acre parcel the Wayne Art Center is seeking to acquire, and this grant application would significantly help with that project. With us tonight is Ms. Nancy Campbell, of the Executive Director for the Wayne Art Center, and I know she'd be happy to answer any specific questions or about the project itself.
Thank you so much. Any commissioner questions or questions for Ms. Campbell? Seeing none. Any public participation on this issue? No, I think this sounds like a wonderful project. Keep our fingers crossed for the grant. I'm going to call a vote on Resolution 2024-137. All in favor? Aye. Unanimous. Good luck. All right, we're going to move on to the budget. At first, we have item A, which is just discussion and direction to determine the millage rate for 2025. Mr. White?
Thank you. So we'll pick up where we left off at the last meeting. If you'll recall, we were asked, the administration was asked to go back and provide an alternative to the budget that was presented that included the tax increase that we discussed that night. So what I was intending on doing here is presenting or talking through what that alternative looks like. And then at the end of the discussion, we'll have a live spreadsheet here that we can work with based on direction that we get from the Board of Commissioners. And then we'll set the millage rate that we'll then plug into for item B under this budget segment. So, Ian, I'm not sure if you could switch over to my tablet. There it is, sort of. Sorry, I gotta get this slid over here. Thank you. There we go. All right, so what we're looking at here is the same operating statement for the general fund that we've been looking at since mid-October when it was initially presented. I've included a column here that shows what those numbers look like back in October versus where we're at today. So the good news is over the last 2 weeks, we've been able to go back and take a look at, pretty much comprehensively take a look at every department And I want to take a quick second and acknowledge the departments for the work that they did going back into their budgets. They were asked to take a look at all their revenues and expenses, take a look at contracted services, any fees that might need updating or new fees altogether, and areas to shift the burden away from real estate taxes onto the users of whatever that fee is in existence to cover the cost of. Every department took that assignment very seriously. The responses and the recommendations that came back generated significant changes to the bottom line. Some of them were not, realistic to the situation that we're looking at. I mean, at what we were trying to solve for was about according to our baseline numbers, about $174,000 shortfall. When you add in the grant and the economic development manager and some of the other funding elements, we got up to about $400,000. But based on the recommendations that they came back with and some updated information, the revised number as we're sitting here right now is pretty much a balanced general fund. So that $910 is, like we've talked about, the numbers in brackets are good. Those are credits in an accounting sense, so those are good. What I'd like to do quickly is just step through a few of the changes that were made, so we all get an understanding of what happened between mid-October to where we're at today. On the revenue side, interests, basically we increased the interest income by about $50,000. We were able to do this comfortably based on two factors, one of which is that interest rates continue to generate favorable returns, and we have a significant amount of money invested in those different securities for the into next year. So we're confident from that point. The other element is that we have strong general fund reserves, so we have money to invest. So that is one of the benefits, one of the ancillary benefits of having a strong fund balance reserve policy is that that money can be invested and earn income. So we were able to bump that number up. Took another look at our grant revenue, and the work that Melissa's been able to do over the last 2 years has been very, very strong. And quite honestly, the initial number that we had put in was a little bit too conservative, so we increased that. In departmental earnings, one of the recommendations that came back, specifically in this case, was from Tammy in the Parks and Rec Department, is increasing fees for day camp. So that $20,000 there recognizes that increase. And then under refunds and miscellaneous, based on updated information from we get a federal medical subsidy annually, we were able to bump that number up. So that's the $23,000 there. On the expense side, we made we tightened up overtime budgets a little bit. And that's, in a real quick sense, what we did there is we pulled the numbers back to maybe a little bit more of a conservative year. So, for example, the amount we adjusted, which is about 65,000 of that 67, that's like one snowstorm for our, and qualifying that it only snows after 3:30 p.m. on Friday to 7 o'clock on a Monday morning. It only snows over that weekend window. So that's 100% overtime. So that's basically pulled that number back a little bit on Public Works and Police. The thought being that it's more conservative from a budgeting standpoint, and if we get walloped this winter, we'll be back in front of the board maybe in spring to talk about what those actuals look like and what the rest of the year might look like, and maybe appropriating some additional dollars at that time. The remaining balance of that makes up the 67 just represents a handful of payroll changes that resulted from open enrollment, which ended last week for our employees. So employees changed their status, whether they're opting out of the medical program, whether they now qualify for the sick buyback, or they got their CDL. So a handful of changes there as well. On the payroll liability side, that $30,020 represents a reduction we were able to realize now that we've got our final numbers from Divot for our medical premiums for next year. So that number changed in a positive way. On supplies and materials, similar to the overtime number, we pulled back our salt estimate by a little bit. Just, again, trying to be a little bit more conservative on that, anticipating or maybe more hoping for a more mild winter. Contracted services, we added the $100,000 that was approved at the last Board of Commissioner meeting. So that's 100 of that 178. And then the 78,000, that's the county increased tipping fees for next year. Sorry, I didn't mean to make that jump like that. Increased the tipping fee next year. So we are going from $87 up to $90.50 per ton. We had built in some increase originally, but with that increase and re-looking at the estimates of tonnage, we're anticipating a little bit higher cost on that front. And then on the community orgs, there's a $9,000 adjustment there. That's for parking share estimates. And then finally, on the interfund transfers, that's the general fund. We increased its obligation to the debt service fund to account for the facility bonds, which closed, or which the board approved a couple meetings ago and are set to close on Wednesday. But we have the final pricing on that, so we wanted to make sure that was incorporated into here. All told, we were able to, in a positive way, move the general fund bottom line by just a shade under $175,000, which puts us at the 910. So, for all intents and purposes, at a balanced budget. When we scroll down and we get to some of the modifications to that budget, what we wanted to keep in the budget was the economic development manager. So the $150,000 that we discussed at the last meeting is still in here. I think we talked about it at the last meeting, but if real estate taxes aren't adjusted as costs grow, then naturally a greater share of our expenses are being covered by the business taxes. So the 32% that Adam presented on earlier, over time, that percentage will grow and grow and grow, which only makes it more critical that we've got a resource that is managing or is doing everything that we have within our control as a municipality to support that segment of our revenue. At the same time, we also kept the $25,000 in to get going on the zoning rewrite. That was in the discussion from last meeting as well. Then, to try to offset some of those costs, two different reductions within the expense budget that we wanted to propose is, the first is a reduction in the tree management budget. Right now, or as originally presented, it was a $400,000 budget, which incorporates pretty much two major tasks. The first one is, as we discussed this past summer, is the 3-year process, the bidding process to go and manage trees throughout our park system that need to be addressed. So that's part of the $400,000, and then a significant portion of it is the maintenance of the trees in the right-of-way that the township is responsible for the removal of. Historically, how we've addressed that is when trees need to be removed in the right-of-way, we address it. And what has happened over time is that number has ballooned on us. So what we're proposing for 2025 and going forward really is a reduction of $75,000 here, which I'll admit now is a bit arbitrary. There's no real science to that number other than trying to balance the budget. And what would happen then is we would continue managing and removing those trees as they come up throughout the year until we hit the budget number. And at that point, we would reevaluate where we're at in terms of our revenues and expenses. And if we feel it's a significant enough amount, or if it's June and we still have 7 months of the year to go, come back to the board and have a discussion on how we want to address it going forward. Or if it's late in the year, like if we're having this discussion right now and there's only a month to go, then perhaps any of the trees that are evaluated just wait until the next fiscal cycle and get picked up out of next year's budget. Then there's the other element here is a reduction in Surrey service funding. Back in 2022, it was $10,000 a year. That had gone back up to the 35,000 it was pre-COVID. So what's being recommended here is that it just go back to the 2022 level of 10,000. So that's the $25,000 there. And then from a revenue standpoint, to help offset those, to balance things, is the incorporation of a credit card fee. The township accepts credit card payments for taxes and utility, or sewer rent and stormwater payments, as well as building permits and anything else that occurs over the counter. What we're proposing is add a fee for the convenience of using the credit card in those scenarios, to offset the cost. As you could see, $110,000 is a significant cost. What we would propose then is the fee to help cover that. If folks don't want to pay the fee, there are other options to make payments to the township that have always been in place, either cash, check, cash or check for those items. So whether they want to pay the fee and use their credit cards, or if they don't want to pay the fee, there's alternative options there as well. And with all that, we end the net revenue with the modifications is $36,000 and some change to the good. And the fund balance is in a good place as well, at well over the 25% requirement of the fund balance. So that's where we stand right now. Again, I just want to go back and highlight a couple things that.
Bill, before you go back, what's the percent on the general fund?
That was my question. Isn't it 30-something?
No,
Well, the policy
is
is
25%.
Yeah, the policy is 25%. This is, I don't have the percentage, but we're $500,000 to the good on that.
Okay.
Okay, Bob's telling me we're just over 25. So compliant with the fund balance policy. So kind of backing up or maybe looking at the budget process from a little bit higher level, the one thing that when we start the process in June and July every year is the task to the departments is come up with your most accurate budget that you can. There's the one thing that we stress heavily is there's no fluff, there's no overestimate here in the anticipation that this turns into a negotiation with the Board of Commissioners. We always try to nail the number as tightly as we can based on the information that's available to us. Naturally, what ends up happening when you have multiple departments estimating costs over a couple thousand revenue and expense lines, there is some conservative budgeting that goes on, but it's never the intention to go in and present a budget that asks for a tax increase, and then we end up in a position like we are now. A couple examples specific to this year is we had three major cost drivers that we had to account for going into this budget. The one is we have the new the CSU unit in police at about $950,000 at a full year cost. We have the collective bargaining agreement costs for the wages for the staff at about just shade under $600,000, as well as I noted the trash fees jumping up on us. All told, it's about a $90,000 increase heading into next year. So right there, we had three elements looking at a $1.6 million increase to our expenses before we looked at any other line items within the budget. On the flip side, and I know I've talked about this in the past, but it's important to reiterate, on the revenue side, trying to estimate business privilege taxes. A great example here is we've estimated next year at $8 million on a baseline. Right now, as we sit for 2024, we're at $8 million, just a few $1,000s under that. So we're basically forecasting that at flat. But if you look at the numbers up in our operating statement, it looks like we're budgeting for a decrease. And obviously, there's more than business privilege in this number. There's also the realty transfer and mercantile taxes. But specific to business privilege taxes, this year we realized $1.1 million in audit revenue in 2024, which is a testament to the work that division does and the resources we added to help support that initiative. In 2023, our audit revenue was $27,000. So when we're trying to nail down revenues, that's the kind of fluctuation or volatility that is really tough for us to nail down. So for 2024, an audit, we've got $450,000 in. There's always a couple audits in queue and they're working on, but the realization of those is unknown at best. When it comes to the transfer taxes, next year we put $3.5 million in. This year we're right at $3.5 million. We may end up just north of that once we get the December revenue. But that includes Villanova's acquisition of Cabrini. And a few years ago, there was a very large one-time revenue from the acquisition of several apartment buildings throughout town. So we've budgeted based on another one of those types of transactions happening again next year. It's happened 2 of the last 3 years. Will it happen next year? Odds makers would probably flip a coin. So that's the difficulty in trying to nail down the revenue estimates. On permitting, it's kind of this. It's the same story. You know, this year we're at 4.6 million, which has been a fantastic year. Sorry, 1, 2, there. But so you look at that and you're like, well, why is the township estimating less? Well, this year Villanova has put multiple major projects through, which has driven those numbers up. And while we know they have a long-term capital plan, we know that, or we're starting to learn about plans at Cabrini, we still don't yet know the timing or the magnitude of those investments. So it's hard to really nail down that revenue number. But on a baseline, what we have for 2025 is in line with the past couple of years. And then finally, just departmental earnings was the other one that I looked at, that it shows like we're budgeting for a decrease. But what's driving up the number on this category this year is an extremely high amount of police details. So the extra duty details are those where private institutions hire our police officers to manage traffic. Again, Villanova is the major customer there, but there are other details throughout town. There's been a significant increase in the number of those details this year. The difference with this on an accounting standpoint is there's an expense increase on those too. So that's pretty much a wash. So next year, if we have the same type of detail activity as we had this year, we could anticipate higher revenues, but we'd also have higher expenses. So those are 4 really specific examples where if you look at this statement quickly, you might think that, you know, why is it the township budgeting for more revenues? Excuse me. And those are some of the complexities that we deal with. And it also speaks to the point of, you know, we talked about shifting the burden of covering our ongoing operating expenses more to the real estate tax. Is the volatility that we see here is part of the reason why, because we've seen those numbers jump up. We've also seen them fall dramatically year over year. So as long as we're in a position where this is our funding makeup, having a strong general fund balance is going to be critical, which it is a strong general fund balance. So where we're at today is a good place. And then in kind of organizing my thoughts for tonight, it came up with the, you know, over the long term, any kind of shift to predictability will equal sustainability for our operating statement. So we don't have these large fluctuations in revenue that impact operations on the expense side. And a really good example of that is if we had a larger share of our operating costs being covered by real estate taxes and weren't so dependent upon the revenues from the business taxes, you know, we've got a couple major financial items coming at us down the road between a capital plan and what we're working on with the fire company. This year would have been a good example where the 1.1 million in audit revenue from the business taxes could go to the capital plan. And in years where we have good revenue years on the revenue side, it could fund the capital plan while things remain a little bit more sustainable on the operating side. So that's not a problem we're going to solve right now, but it does speak back to when we're putting together our initial estimates and recommendations to the board, that's a thought process we're having with recommending tax increases on an ongoing type of basis. And those were the talking points I wanted to get through. So thank you for indulging me.
No, thank you very much, and thanks to your entire staff for looking at things so closely and spending the better part of the last 2 weeks rehashing all the numbers. So we're very appreciative. Commissioner questions or comments for Mr. White? I have a couple of little ones, but mine are pretty petty. I was just wondering what the percent of the credit card fee, is it a 3%? What are you thinking?
Two and a half would be the starting point. That would just about get us at a break even. So 2.5% to 3% would be the zone that we would want to focus in on if we impose that fee.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say that it seems to me that a lot of for other firms, for instance, are doing 3, but it might just be that it's a nice round number. I don't really have any idea. So, Bill, did I understand that when you were talking about the trees, that you just took 75K out of the 400, so there's still a budget of 325 there?
Yes.
Okay,
Because
good. I misheard something and I was a little confused, but then when I just read it, it seemed to make sense.
Fair enough. And just to be crystal clear on that is the presentations that were done this past summer with the management of the trees in the parks, it is in this budget to move forward with that.
Okay. And we have talked in the past about not funding Surrey services. I don't know how commissioners feel about that now, but I just wanted to bring it up.
You don't know how I feel about that?
I know how you feel.
I think we know how you feel
about it.
I actually, just to jump onto that piece of the conversation, Bill did send around the applications for consideration. Surrey's not in there. Did they submit? They didn't submit a request. They're out. Sorry, I shouldn't jump to that. But if they're not even asking, I don't think we're giving.
Yeah, I don't want to speak for any of the institutions or organizations or institutions. I think perhaps the ones that submitted are ones that are looking for a little bit more money. Those are the ones that we got requests from. So I think.
So is my understanding that at least 2 years ago, Bill, you created a simple application format, since this is something we struggled with, and every organization who wants to be considered for funding, the ones that have been in the budget, are asked to fill that out and return it.
That is correct, except I can't take credit for creating that form. Our finance folks did that.
Nice job. So did we get submissions for every community organization that's in this budget this year using that form?
The Historical Society and the parades, we didn't send forms to, but their amount is so small in comparison to the others.
Right, I think parades have never been considered there.
Right.
But, so I guess I'm trying to be real clear. Surrey got a form and didn't submit for consideration.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
So just a couple thoughts, and Bill, understand the challenges that this presents every year, and do appreciate the work that you and the staff put in, particularly over the last 2 weeks. I know we threw a lot at you 2 weeks ago, probably created a lot of stress, but I do like seeing the work that was done, and the overall number makes me very happy. just a couple thoughts going forward. And I know we talk about these every year. I think I agree with what I hear at least one of my colleagues saying, and would like, I mean, my thought all along is Surrey's not in the township. I don't believe we should be funding organizations outside the township, so I would support putting them down to zero. An idea that Commissioner Mulroney and I talked about and brought to the board earlier this year that didn't gain support was creating a fund for all 501c3s. Actually, not all 501c3s. I think we separated the library, the fire company, but having a set number that all the other 501c3s would be rated against. I still think that's a good idea. It gives us a number that we know that we can plan for every year. And then if we want to do percentage increases over time, that's fine. But I don't think we should be going above that number if we don't have a balanced budget. So if we're, I don't believe we should be raising taxes to pay additional beyond that number to these organizations. My second thought is around new employees. You know, it's hard for me to make an informed decision. We just heard about this the comp plan and the new staffer tied to the comp plan 2 weeks ago. It's hard for me to make an informed decision on whether this is a good idea or not in 2 weeks. The slide that was presented tonight, I think, is really valuable. And if we had that mid-year, I think we could really have some really good conversations, really look into what other communities are doing that were identified there. And I think that should be kind of the guidelines going forward. If there are thoughts around new employees, I would like to see those mid-year so we can have some healthy conversations among staff and here at the dais about, you know, what other communities are doing, the successes they've had. You know, if it hasn't worked out, why not? And then I think we're better informed come November on whether we want to go forward with that or not. So those are my couple thoughts just based on this presentation tonight. But again, Bill, appreciate the work and do like seeing these overall numbers.
Other commissioner questions or comments? Riley's one.
Sorry, just a quick comment. I know there's a lot of store fronts and stores that are empty. Could the business department figure out like how much we're missing because of that? And then compare that to the $150,000, you know, salary for a new staff member.
The short answer is yes. It would take us sending somebody out to count the storefronts, because it's not information we would necessarily have based on the information we get. The real estate taxes are being paid by someone. The business licenses, really, we get into that kind of that tricky area with the taxpayer bill of rights and how we're able to use that information for business or operating purposes. So I mean, we could.
Maybe, all right. Maybe a shortcut to that. Would the Wayne Business Association know that number? And we could just ask them.
I would imagine they'd give us a pretty good number for the Wayne business area.
Yeah.
I'm not sure they would have a lot outside of there, yeah.
Right, okay, thanks.
And I just, just real quickly on that front, like when we talk about how we're organized administratively, we have our community development department. That is very different from what you see in other communities when you hear planning and community development. So our folks, the ones that we have working here in the community development department, they're managing the permits that are being issued to ongoing projects throughout town. There's no ability for proactive kind of development or planning approaches to anything. And a great example of that is, we've hired FHI to come in and help with the comp plan. Any kind of planning initiative that we do, we don't have planners on staff. We don't have a department that incorporates the forward-thinking folks that are on staff to do that kind of work. So our community development department is reacting to the actual business activity that's going on right now, in addition to the property maintenance and the other code violations that they're out enforcing. So there's no capacity within that group for expanding beyond for planning and economic development.
Yep. Bill, I mean, my comment wasn't saying that it's a good idea or a bad idea. My comment was, that's a good conversation to have mid-year, and then, we have a discussion, and maybe we all agree to it, maybe we don't. Maybe we agree to parts of it and say, let's try something that might be unique that other communities aren't doing. But not having those conversations, we kind of
Sure, no, yeah.
take that away.
Yeah, no, my qualification was more just clarifying nomenclature, because you'll see it in another community and you'll think, well, we've got a department named the same thing, are we doing the same stuff? And that's not always the case.
Yeah.
So just, sorry, Jack, are you going?
Go ahead.
This has been an issue that I have been talking about for at least the years that I've been in leadership, and I'm in my 4th year. So I feel very strongly that Radnor's going to have a really difficult time keeping up, being competitive, and not just filling storefronts. I don't think, I've got a small business district in Ward 5, and there are little businesses throughout our community. Wayne Business District is not our only commercial area, and I just think that if we have somebody who is considering it and attracting businesses that we want here, not just putting up with whatever business can come and pay the rent. And we've been pretty fortunate, but I think we know that there are a couple of types of stores that maybe not every resident likes the look of them or something like that. So I think when you have somebody who has that we get the right background, the right approach, and really understanding the nuances of how communities shape and shift over time, I just think that we're going to see a much more successful community if we have the professional expertise on staff. So I am a huge proponent of this position, and would very much like to see it get started sooner rather than later. So I'm gonna vote enthusiastically for a budget that includes that position in it. We can stay on that topic if we want to kind of have more discussion around it. I have a couple other small things, but if anybody wants to jump in on that.
I agree with what you just said.
Well, I also think you need to think of it I really think that this is a job that will pay for itself in no time at all, and that the $150,000 or whatever he has budgeted for this person's salary and benefits, we'll see it. And it may not be in the first 6 months, and it may not be in the first year, but we'll see that pay for itself.
So just another couple of small ones, and it may have been asked and I just didn't quite catch the answer, but when you are reducing lines of expenditures for overtime and the salt for public works, what happens? What happens when we hit what's in the budget and need more? Say we do get all these snowstorms that we don't think we're going to get, and they show up.
Well, what'll happen is we'll come back to the board and say, we budgeted X, we've spent Y. And if it's the end of January, then there's probably going to be a discussion about what we might need to think to get us through the rest of that winter and maybe set us up for anything that might come in the following December. If it's April, then it's, all right, we budgeted X, we spent Y, and we're good, or, the overtime's struggling, we're not going to be able to, address leaves the way that we want to at the end of the year. we might need a delta of something. But it'll force us to just have a conversation about it. Whereas right now, we've budgeted kind of assuming worst case, and we've been able to just operate that way.
Okay. And then to the credit card charge, where do we most often see residents using a credit card? Is it when they pay for a permit? Is it online for camps? Where do we see the most?
Real estate taxes and utility billing.
And if a person does not want to pay that fee, they can come in person and use a check, and there's no fee with that.
That is correct. They can also mail a check.
Yep.
They can pay cash.
Okay, so there's a way to, an individual can get around that additional
Absolutely.
fee by paying in cash or check or money order. Okay.
Are those, I want to bounce
That's
off of
my
that
question.
question if I could. Are those credit card payments made by individuals or by banks on behalf of mortgage companies?
Individuals.
Cool, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Larkin.
I guess I quickly want to say three things, and I feel like I retread them every year, so I'm sorry for people who have said that heard them in the past. We, for a long time, and Jake and I are the only ones on the board who probably remember, had Robert Zinkowski, Bob, the township manager, who did a phenomenal job of keeping costs incredibly low for the township. One of his huge legacies for Radnor Township was that our taxes are lower than any of our surrounding municipalities because he just never raised taxes. And he did that essentially by, as lines of employment would stop being filled, he would just not rehire anyone, and staff at the township did an extraordinary job to step up and do the work that needed to be done. And we have a phenomenal staff. I'm not going to say necessarily because of that, maybe in spite of that, I don't know, but we have a phenomenal staff who are able to deal with that, and we should be extremely grateful. The reality now, though, is that our tax rates are just like comically lower than the people around us. Our tax rate right now is 2.43 mils, whereas Lower Merion's tax rate, I don't know these off the top of my head, I had to look them up. Awesome, thank you. I'm going to go off of my screen because I found it. 4.7, so more than double ours. And Tredifferen's is, do you have that on screen? Oh, I had it a moment ago. It's about 3. It's like 3.9, 3.91. So not quite double ours, but getting pretty close. Meanwhile, Tredifferent does not offer anything like the services that we do. They don't have trash pickup. I think that I threw out half the stuff in my garage last week, and it was all gone when I looked at the end of the day on Tuesday. We have 29 parks and 400 acres of parkland. Meanwhile, Tredifferent has 265 acres and 12 parks, but they're still paying nearly double what we do. I am concerned, however, that we don't have an economic development officer for the reasons, Moira, that you articulated. I am concerned that we are paying so little to do the things that we need to do, and as a result of which, as time goes on, we're going to fall farther and farther behind. Our pipes are made out of terracotta and they leak. We have tremendous flooding problems. A lot of downtown Wayne and other areas in the township are struggling to find tenants. It's an awesome place to live, work, and play. I don't think that there are problems that we need to deal with immediately necessarily, but some of the cracks are beginning to show. Bill, if you could go back to your budget for a moment, I appreciate the time and effort that went into this, and there are certainly some instances in which it seems like you were able to right-size numbers based on improved information. But when you say we're going to trim overtime, you can put whatever number in you want there. We're not running a 7-Eleven. If we have to send people out because there's a flood or there's snowfall or something, you're going to do it, and we're going to have to pay it. It's great that we're going to save $20,000 in camps, and Tammy, I imagine that that was a tough decision to make for you. But we're not actually saving the residents any money by doing that. We're just shifting the burden from the property owners of the township generally to the working parents who are trying to keep their kids in camp over the summer so that they can go to work. When we add a credit card fee to the tune of $110,000 per year, yeah, I know technically you can bring in a check, but right now, there's $110,000 worth of people who are paying online via credit card. We're just shifting that cost back to them. They're still paying the money. I love the idea that we can save $75,000 in canopy management, but that's a really round number. Did we get to it by any particular metric, or is it just like 75 sounds good?
I mentioned that we got to that to balance the budget. I mean,
Yeah.
honestly,
That's
that
a-
number, we could spend $800,000 a year on that particular
Didn't someone
area.
die on the Radnor Trail when they got hit by a falling limb?
That is, yes, that happened. It just turns out that the tree was actually perfectly healthy.
Yeah, but I mean, that doesn't make me want to spend less money on canopy management. It makes me want to spend more money on canopy management because apparently the healthy trees are killing people. So, I mean, bottom line, I appreciate the time and effort that went into this. I would frankly prefer to impose taxes that pay for the needs that we have rather than taxes that correspond to a budget that is the budget we wish we had. I would rather spend the money that we need, and parenthetically, I am sure that that $150,000 you have for an EDC person is consistent with a hire sometime mid-year. We're not going to hire on January 1st, but I will say that it is very much my expectation. I want to publicly say and right-size expectations on this. Whoever we hire is someone who I don't want to be taking home $150,000 when you include their benefits, and I certainly don't want to just be spending that in terms of travel and expenses. I want this to be a person who flies out to LA and goes to conferences. I want a person who can call the C-suite at Trader Joe's or something and have a reasonable expectation that they're going to get a call back, instead of someone who just got a marketing degree from Temple's Business School or something, who I'm sure would be an excellent starting position, but that's not who I want to have filling our township's spots right now. So anyway, I'm not opposed if the board has the appetite to the higher hike. Our taxes will still be far lower than anyone around us. Our services will be sustainable, hopefully. We're moving towards sustainable. The one thing that I will say I strongly oppose, and I hope that we can take out if the board doesn't have the appetite to gross up. I'm not hearing the kind of outrage that I perhaps hoped for, so I don't know that we're going to go with the Jack Larkson's tax him to death plan. However, the one thing, the hill that I would like to die on here is I don't want to raise the cost of camp. We should not ask people to spend an additional $20,000 to take care of their kids over the summer. That's my hill to die on. So that's my spiel. Thank you.
Very nice. Tammy, just a quick question. When you're talking about raising $25,000 roughly from camp fees, what is that changing the fee from to?
I believe mathematically we raised it $100 based on the current attendance at camp.
For a week?
For the entire 6 weeks
For the
of camp.
entire 6 weeks
Yes.
of camp? Oh, thank you. That's very helpful. Yes, Treasurer.
Yeah, I just wanted to say something about the credit card fee. And it's kind of a mixed bag. On the one hand, everybody else charges for it. The county, the school board. So it's an obvious place to go, but it's not totally free. I've had a number of residents who told me they thought it was a terrific service to them to make it easier to pay taxes. And so we're taking away something that is an advantage, and some people are going to complain about that. It also is something that makes it easier and sometimes even possible for people to pay taxes at some time. So there is a possibility that it delays our cash flow. So those are just some thoughts. It's not, on the one hand, it's an obvious place to go for money because it's a cost that we are paying, and we're just passing it on to the people who are causing it. On the other hand, we're taking away something that some of our residents really value, and we're making it more difficult for some of them to pay taxes in a timely way.
Thank you. That's an interesting point. The sort of, you pay with your credit card once and you get to spread out the payment versus the township that wouldn't tolerate that. So that's interesting. Any other questions, comments? I do see that we have both the Art Center, as we said, Ms. Campbell, and the library, Ms. Platfoot, here. And as you saw on the diagram, there was zero increase for both of those. So I just wondered if either of you wanted to say something.
Hi, I'm Joyce Platfoot. I'm the director of the library. And, you know, we recognize that this is a really hard decision for the township each year, and we thank you for your support. It's obvious that the majority of our support comes from the township. We typically try to budget about 64%, which is historically going back what we look at in terms of support from the township when we're looking at budgeting for the coming year. Typically, by the end of the year, it comes in closer to 70%. So the township is supporting the library at 70%, roughly, once the budget is over. That means that the library is trying to raise another 30% of the budget. And so if there's no increase to the library budget in the coming year, we'll have to figure out where that money comes from. And I don't know what the answer to that is. It would impact our, most of the cost is staffing costs. So we spend about 73% of the budget on staffing. And I'm sorry, I just lost my breath. So, you know, we'd have to evaluate our cost of living increases and whether or not we could even, you know, what kind of increase we could give. So I think that would be the impact for us next year. We are already committing in our proposal increasing our fundraising by $25,000, which is a big sum for us. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it is. So just to give you kind of a sense of the overview of everything for us. Thanks.
You might want to include in your planning for next year my daughter's overage fees, which is significant. So like that's an extra 2% right there.
Yeah, fines add up. And I'm happy to answer questions at any point too. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Campbell, do you want to say something?
I just want to say that the Art Center is very grateful to Radnor Township for all their support, and really it makes a big difference in what we do every day. And you know, just this past weekend, we had a major workshop at the Art Center, and we had students coming, a workshop presenter coming from Virginia. And students were actually flying in from places around the country to take this workshop. And the teacher who came in from Virginia said that she has never seen an art center as beautiful as Wayne Art Center and as equipped as Wayne Art Center is. And you know, it just made us really feel really proud that we have such a wonderful asset in our community. And we really appreciate everything that all of our sponsors and government agencies do to support the Wayne Art Center and make it thrive. We work really hard, and we are not as fully staffed as we should be. You know, we just appreciate what the township does. So, do you have any questions or anything?
No. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Do we want to do some number
Yeah, so I mean,
rattling?
that's the way we're set up, is we can add, subtract, however the board sees fit. And then the spreadsheet will calculate what the millage would be to break even, and we can work off of that. So, I mean, I started based on some initial feedback with the Surrey, as I bumped that up to the full 35,000. So at that point, that'll be no funding in 2025 for Surrey. And then we can go from there.
I would advocate to give 10 of that to the library. Anybody care? Or have objection to that? Nobody's yelling.
Why don't you plug that in and let's start seeing what it looks like. I have a question about the senior center. It was my understanding from your presentation that $8,400 increase is to do some guardrail entrance work that the township could do for them since it's our property.
Yeah, I'll ask Steve to chime in on that real quick.
So we've actually, we're waiting to get a price to purchase the guide rail, to purchase the railing, and the Public Works folks would install it, so that would come out of the mix.
Okay. So I would say let's zero that out since that was their additional request. And we're gonna help them get there without making the cash contribution.
How do we feel about the credit card fee?
I would put the money back in the camps before I would put a credit card fee myself.
Mike, couldn't hear what you said, Jeff.
I'm voting camps over credit card fee.
I feel like I'm torn on the credit card fee because I think it would, you know, it's kind of like, it's not our fault, right? It's the banks, it's the credit card companies. They're doing this to everybody. I'm sure that, you know, you all know that you're either covering the fee or you're asking the person to cover the fee. You know, some nonprofits have the option to opt in and help us pay this fee. I have encountered places that do a percentage. So if you've got a really big bill and you're paying 3% on a big bill versus a small bill, you know, I've had to do a workaround and drive a check to a place because it was going to be hundreds of dollars. So if it's, you know, are we looking at a flat rate credit card fee of,
2.5%.
or we're doing 2.5% of whatever the amount is? You know, think about really large transactions and the impact on.
I'm just going
on
to play
that.
devil's advocate. A stamp is pretty cheap. And you can write a check and you can mail it. They
That's
send
it.
you the envelope, I think, these days. So I don't say, I can't go, you can't use your credit card pretty much anywhere these days except perhaps a grocery store and not get a 3% fee. One, I don't think the camps are in the order of magnitude that we're talking about with the credit card fee. So we could potentially do both. But I'm for the credit card fee.
And so to the camps, Tammy, you said it's $100. So from what to what? Like, what are we charging now and what's $100? I mean, $100 on $100 is a 100% increase. But if the 6-week camp cost $1,000,
So I believe last year's camp fee, and if you'll bear with me for a
Sure.
second, let me just pull it up. I believe it was 1,975, but don't quote me. Let's see. Okay, so full day camp was 1,975. That was for residents. We have a resident fee, and then we have, of course, the non-resident fee, which is plus 30 on the top of every program. And then half day camp was 1,650. So this is specific to Radnor Day Camp. So the thought process behind this was adding $100 to the fee, based on the current registration, which primarily is full day campers. So it really amounted to, again, the additional $20,000. So I don't know if that answers your question.
it does, exactly. Thank you.
And then, I mean, just to chime in also, because the majority of camp is paying by credit card, because we have an online registration system, I think we talked internally that that wouldn't be applied in that case. because it would be blended into the $100 fee, just for clarification. So they wouldn't, so camp parents who are registering for camp wouldn't pay, the additional amount times the 2.5%. Like, we would be absorbing that within that $100 plus $100 fee.
So that, I think if we're doing credit card fees, we're doing it on every credit card. And I don't think it should be isolated to just your real estate taxes are gonna get an extra fee, but your camp isn't. So I would argue that it should not be included in the $100 increase. I know you probably don't have the data at your fingertips, and it's been an awfully long time since I was putting a child in summer camp, but it strikes me that Radnor is very inexpensive for full-day participation of kids in camp. So I'm not sure that this was, I think it's reasonable to expect that there will be increases.
When
And
did you
was
last
the last
increase
time-
the, yeah.
We increased it last year, so 2023 into 2024, we did have an increase. And we've increased, so 2020 was an anomaly, 2021 was a little bit of an anomaly because of the way camp was structured, due to COVID. But we have had steady increases since 2022. 2023 to 2024 was probably the most substantial. So that's why this year I wasn't going to raise camp prices, but, in doing this exercise, trying to figure out, where we can offset, it obviously is we have 160 kids in camp, essentially 200 kids in camp, so it makes it easy, to kind of, in one program, generate that amount of revenue to help with this, with this exercise. Will expenses go up commensurately as well? Of course, we always, experience that with staff that return, that get pay increases, different vendors we pay for activities and things like that. Everything goes up, supplies go up across the board, so that's also a factor. But just on the point of credit cards, with all the programs, we do buffer in a percentage over and above the proceeds to be able to pay for the instructors, supplies, incidentals of indirect expenses that we have on behalf of the department, for the planning and everything that goes into that. So that's where that credit card fee essentially does become blended in all of the programming. Because, I've just always, kind of worked with the finance department on that because we didn't want parents to have to see that percentage every time they pay for a program, if they do pay for credit card. Because we want to incentivize them to pay through MyRec, which is our online registration system, and not do it, on paper, in person, with a check and all of that, because it makes it easier for us to have everything computerized through the system.
Tammy, what's the breakdown? Radnor residents versus out of town?
I would say it's just a handful of non-residents, like probably no more than 5.
And
For day camp specifically.
And have you compared pricing to other day camps in the area, Upper Mainline Y? I think there was one at Cabrini,
Future Stars.
Future Stars, yeah.
We have, so it's not an apples to apples comparison, but we're in the range. There's a camp that takes place at Valley Forge Military Academy. They have go-karts, so it's sort of not the same type of program that we're delivering. But I would say, if we've compared to other townships, we've looked at Tredyffrin. They do a camp that they have out in a park that's outside, and they have hourly fees and daily fees and all of that, whereas ours is a lump sum for the full 6 weeks. I would say it's comparable. But I have to go back and take a look at it. Everything's just so different, when you're looking at it. It's hard to make those apples to apples comparisons.
So if you put that $100 on it, 6 weeks, $2,100, was that the number?
Yeah, around there, yeah.
Yeah, so $350 a week?
Yeah.
That is, having put 4 kids through full-day camps, that's still relatively cheap.
All right, other questions or comments? We have Mr. White back to.
3:45.
No, no problem. We had a little lively debate. So.
So what we're looking at,
Why did it change?
what I added during that last conversation was just what the millage change would need to be to get this number to be break even or slightly above, or I guess in this case, slightly below zero, which is in fact a good thing. So right now, with the credit card fees removed, all of the other numbers on here as they are, we'd be looking at roughly 0.5% tax increase, or 0.0117 mils, to generate the revenue needed to cover everything.
What if you take out the 10 for the library? I know that we have an advocate here on the board, but nobody else has an advocate here tonight.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
It didn't change it much. When it
Well, yeah,
just-
10,000 is not going to move the needle
10,000 is
much.
not going to move it. That credit card fee.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Just to see it again, could you put that credit card fee back in?
Yeah, why didn't the millage?
It did, it's positive.
Oh, I see.
It was negative 0.42.
And now it's positive.
Yeah, I have the formula, so it's not going to calculate a millage decrease.
My other question, this is just as an aside, and I should have asked everybody this a long time ago, but there is a debt service tax levy of .0587 mils established in 2016. So does that mean we have to go up by at least that?
Now, that amount was set back in, I think it was 2016 or
16, that's what you just, yeah.
to cover the debt service that was issued that year for the park improvements. So that's pretty much a fixed number. We did cut it in half, or we cut it by the same ratio as the reassessment required to make it revenue neutral back in 2021. But in terms of millage, it's generating the revenue that's necessary to pay off that particular debt issuance. So that's a long way of saying, no, that number just stays exactly the way it is. What we're contemplating is the other piece of millage.
Okay. Thank you very much.
And the
That's
sum of
helpful.
which
So that's
will
just, it's a constant,
It's a-
and,
yeah.
yeah, got it, I got it.
Fixed millage.
It's
for
not
lack
an
of a better-
increase, is the
Right.
bottom line.
That is-
I misread it, sorry.
So, sorry, Bill, the Parks and Rec, the 20,000, is that shown in here?
No, that's shown up in these numbers above.
Oh, right, right.
Yep. So if the board's direction was to hold the registration fees where they're at, we would just want to make sure there's at least 20,000 in the bottom line to cover that. Because I'll go into the accounting system and reduce that revenue back down. But it won't reflect immediately in here, because this information here is pulling directly from the accounting system.
Okay.
Can you go back up and show us the items? So it sounds to me, because I'm not hearing any objections, that reducing the amount towards tree service, overtime, and Public Works had another one in there, right? Salt? I
Yeah.
think we all just kind of gave thumbs up on those. I mean,
Okay.
I'm not speaking for my colleagues, but
I mean,
The-
I object, I just don't think that I'm going to win on that one.
You
We're gonna
object
end
to
up
which?
paying we're going to end up paying for whatever salt we end up needing.
that's right.
We're going to end up paying for whatever tree service we need, whether that's in the form of increased insurance premiums or not. I would prefer to do it up front and budget for it appropriately
I mean, that is my concern too, is that, these are all, obviously very educated assumptions being made, but they are assumptions. And there's a lot of things that we can't plan for. And to be doing a budget that is so tight that if one thing changes, we're back scrambling to try to figure out where it is. And then we're tapping into the reserve fund in a time when we really shouldn't be, because we are well funded. We could be well funded.
Yeah, it's, just quickly, and I don't know if this is going to help, but we usually, when we budget, we usually are aiming for as close to break even as possible. So even in 2024, our original budget was 110,000 surplus. In prior years, I would imagine we were probably in the same area. But because of all these different moving parts, we end up far off of that. In 2 of those years, we ended up positive significantly. What's not shown here is the significant negative that we ended 2020 in because of COVID. So a lot of this, almost $4 million, made up for the losses from the prior year. So we, in budgeting sense, we always are trying to get it as close to zero as possible, and then a million things are going to happen over the course of the year, and we're going to end up somewhere off of that. Hopefully to the positive side versus the negative side.
Yeah, so, we tasked you to do this, and I am so grateful for the work that went into this. I appreciate all the department heads really kind of going back and getting creative and real with their numbers. The downside is our response to our residents. If we've got less money in public works, maybe your street doesn't get plowed. If we have, if we're cutting things in parks, there's less programming. I mean, it all has an effect. So, Radnor is known for our amenities and our services. Or, the commissioners get a request from a resident. We call the manager or a department head, answers right away. I mean, cell phone text messages going off hours with never, ever a complaint, because our residents come first. I just don't ever want to not be able to be that responsive, because, we've got staff that's stretched too thin and not sufficient resources. So that's my hesitation about sort of cutting things that we really can't predict, like public works and trees. But,
And again, there's the general reserve fund. We have a 25% floor. We have 500,000 that we are in surplus at the moment. So, if there is an issue in January with salt or overtime, that is an area where we could look to. So I don't know that it's as dire as I'm hearing. I think this is a budget that can be worked with, and then we have options if we need to go elsewhere in the beginning of the year.
Do I remember that the police asked for an additional lieutenant, right? Detective, an additional detective?
Yeah, the police asked for an additional detective as well as a traffic enforcement person that would have been dedicated to the parks.
That's not included in this.
Neither of those, nor are the public works
I was
positions.
going to say, and Public Works asked for an additional 2 people,
4.
but we're going to be cutting overtime by $67,000?
As proposed, yes.
And the police, public safety is kind of their thing. I assume that they had a reason for asking for those additional people.
They certainly did. Yes.
Okay. This is a terrible plan, okay.
Well, I don't know. We did give them 4 extra officers last year. and a social worker. So, you give, and people keep asking, and you give, and people keep asking. I mean, I agree more might be better, but I'm not sure of that. How about, I'm going back to the hill that Jack's dying on, which is the camps. If we don't increase the fee, but we do the credit card thing. I mean, I agree with Maura's point that it's you can't pick and choose who you're going to do the credit card fee on, in my opinion. And then if you do a 2.5%, it's on any credit charge essentially into the township, but that it would generate a little bit of income without taking it from the population that uses the day camps that often is sort of a less wealthy population. So you're using it as daycare, and that's a really important thing. It would make them pay 2.5 instead of roughly 10% or whatever I just mentally heard from Tammy. But it's a little bit.
So you're suggesting credit card fees across the board, any online payment, but not the increase?
Right, no increase in camper fees. So for a family, if they choose to use the credit card, which Tammy obviously would prefer, but it's not essential, it sounds like, could just get a 2.5% increase instead of a 10% or whatever Tammy had.
I'm good with that.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. And to Tammy's point, I think very few people would show up to camp with a check. I mean, they're all going to pay online through the portal.
Whereas with taxes, that might not be true. Like, I'm cheap enough that I mail my taxes because, I mail my taxes to Delaware County. How about that? Because they're going to charge me 3%.
Right. No, I agree.
I'm too cheap for that. All right, where does this leave us?
So with that consideration that the credit card fee would be applied to all transactions, doesn't that increase the amount of revenue coming in? Because now I also don't know that you could do a mechanism where you could take a fee, not a fee, on an online platform. I think it's all or nothing when you're setting up an online platform that receives credit card payments. So, but you estimated the credit card fees based on just real estate transactions and didn't include any other credit card being charged. So wouldn't that now gain us?
It's real estate, utility billing, and permitting.
With the utility and permitting. So everything on the business operations.
And recreation does use a different online platform than those three revenue streams do.
Yeah, okay. But
to the extent that the imposition of a credit card fee reduces people using the website to pay, does that increase the workload?
I do not think it increases the workload that much. It's hard to estimate that, but no, I don't think it would. And to be clear, it would be on credit card payments even coming into the building and when we have to swipe it as well.
So if I'm reading the room right, it sounds like it won't increase the workload over here because we're already making runs to the bank to deposit checks. We're just, now you've got 15 checks instead of 5. It sounds like it will increase the workload over here because nobody's going to the bank. Now you're making a run that you weren't going on before?
Well, we don't make a run. We send them upstairs, but I think it's processing time. So it's somebody physically coming in, it's mail physically coming in, it's opening it, processing it, and then we still have to go in and backload it through our registration system so that we have it all organized and appropriate where it needs to go to funnel into our rostering systems.
So I've worked on registration platforms. You can register online and click a pay by check. So it's not going to keep people from online registration. You're not going to have data entry by your staff to get all the camper registration information in. The only thing it's going to change is that somebody pays when they register or they pay when they show up because they've registered without payment. So
We still have to go back in and reconcile the payment, though, to the family so that it populates our system and in turn their system so that they know the payment has been received.
How many campers?
Well, if we're just talking about day camp, it's 200, but if we're talking about all the programming across the board.
All of it.
For the year, then it's a lot of programs.
Yeah. I believe that we are being socialized to take the credit card fees in our American life. I just don't think people are surprised by it when they see it. We may get a little irked and move on, but we pay the fee for the convenience of registering, shopping, everything we do online. It's a fee that we're used to seeing, so us not charging it is just messing with our budget. And we are paying it anyway, we pay it out. So I think it's credit cards across the board, every credit card swipe, every registration, regardless of program or business. I would say we're charging credit card fees. Everybody else does. And I think and the numbers will just increase from what you're showing when you factor in all transactions. And then we've saved our residents, including those who send their children to camp. We've saved them from increased camp prices and increased taxes. So.
Can I ask that we commit to having a longer-term conversation as a board starting in like April or May of next year about staffing needs? Because part of the problem that I have is, on the one hand, I agree with you. We just added new police officers to the police department. I like Public Works. They say they need more people. I believe Ricky. He does a phenomenal job. I don't think that he's making that up. We're going to have additional work to do in parks, it sounds like, and literally everybody likes parks. But the problem is there's been no opportunity for the board to connect with what exactly the needs are and why we have those needs. And there's obviously downward pressure on any tax increase, so it's easy to just say, well, let's just push the numbers down and then we can deal with whatever needs we have later. If we actually have information about what the needs are, why we have them, a presentation is helpful. Conversations with commissioners are more helpful. I would like to earmark funds for those things in next year's budget, which is what happened 2 years ago, where we said we wanted to have conversations about what was going to happen with the police. We ended up getting a social worker in addition, and that's how we ended up where we were with them a couple of years ago. What I don't want is for us to just kind of say, with no real input from the people who are saying that we need the additional services, we're just not going to do that because we don't feel like raising taxes by an additional, 0.07% or something? Because 3% increase in taxes does not mean that you're paying 3 additional percent of your property value. It means you're paying like 0.003% of your property value in addition. Your taxes go up by $27. We spent 2 hours talking about $20 per person. So I don't want someone to not have a police officer that comes to the door when they need one because we weren't willing to charge an extra $20 per person. I don't want people to lose out on camp or on having Public Works service them. I don't want their sewer main to explode because that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to have people do additional sewer work with those Public Works positions. Somebody's going to have their basement destroyed because their sewer main backs up. And we could have fixed that problem, and we're choosing not to because we want to save $20. We need to have the conversation in advance so that we know what the actual consequences are. We didn't do that this year, so I want to commit to that next year.
Hear, hear.
I think I made that comment like an hour ago. Could be wrong. But just to go, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole on staffing. But we had a report by the police department. I thought with the 4 additional hires, we were at that top number. Am I mistaken?
No, we're, according to the staffing study, even with the 5 officers we added as part of the new unit, we're still short, I think 3 or 4 positions. And for the sake of the department heads, so they back in October, we had included the requests And I think at that time, we said that because it's the 11th hour in the budgeting process, we didn't feel comfortable pushing forward the staffing requests, but had every intention of coming back and presenting those. So including that to next spring's agenda, all fully on board with that.
All right, so we need to come up with a millage rate to put in the ordinance, is the bottom line.
Yes, and if the board's comfortable with the numbers, that would suggest that we would keep the millage rate next year the same as it is now. This 46,000 has enough to build in the cushion for the 20,000 to keep the day camp fee the same next year. It incorporates the credit card fee, and we're still green.
But Bill, won't that credit card fee amount go up if you're factoring in all transactions?
Like 15 grand.
Just
A little bit.
It
A little
will,
bit
but
more.
Yeah,
But not by much. 15 is what
yeah.
we're saying up here. Okay. Do you want to drop that in to put that up to 125.5, just so we can see the bottom line? Understanding it's an estimate from us up here.
Yeah, so it added a little bit more to the bottom line. And again, remember, a number in brackets that's a positive number. That's a surplus.
All right. So we need to keep moving. Assuming that we put a zero change on the millage rate in the, for the new budget. I guess I want to hear some public comment on that. Is there any? No? Okay. That's interesting.
So I'm still hearing to my left that, a small millage rate affecting residents to the tune of about $20 a year. So what if we, with this picture, where it already looks, tiny bit rosy, 64,000 is going to get spent by the end of the year if it's, it just is. What if we had more? Would we start looking to capital? If we did raise, where would it come? Would we go back to what the department's carved out and give it back? Would we look at a new police officer? Would we consider, if this is what we're here to discuss, what would it do if we put a small millage increase in? What would it do to the bottom line, and what would that additional funding go to? Would it put salt back? Would it, how much we got?
All right, so 1.5% costs about $20. And to Commissioner Larkin's point, that would be 0.003, so that's
About 4/1000.
less than 4/1000th of your assessed value. And it's about, so that generates, it's close to a $300,000 surplus. Honestly, from there, we can have a discussion then in spring about how, when we get it to the staffing, talk about that. We could talk about the unfunded capital list and using some of the dollars to put over there, or a combination of all of the above, including what I referred earlier, or discussed earlier, is if we have a positive year in terms of business privilege audits or something like that that generates unforeseen revenue, that could be shifted to capital. But this puts us in a position to have those conversations.
Again, my point is if you're looking for $250,000, and you need it during the year, we have 500,000 in excess of the 25% in the general fund. To take 250,000 now for thoughts about hiring a staff member next year, we should just do that next year. Like we just said, we want to have discussions in April. Like why? Like we're setting aside money for a staffer that we may not even agree on.
Yeah, I agree. I wanted to do the exercise to see what the number would be, and if it's not enough to make a significant difference in a department or a program, or to start building our capital fund that we don't have, which would be something that I think takes more conversation. Just raising taxes to have a surplus, that's why I was asking. If we got, okay, so 300,000, what would we go back in and spend it on this budget so that it's money that we know that is targeted for a particular project or initiative, but just to raise taxes to have a little bit in the bank, I'm with you on that.
But I don't think that we would be raising $300,000 in this instance. What we would be doing is we have right now a budget that pretends we won't spend $67,000 in overtime when we know that we certainly will. We got a budget originally that said, here is our best guess for what our payroll costs will be, ceteris paribus. And we've now said we'd like you to cut that, and staff has said, okay, we can just trim that payroll number, and hopefully it doesn't snow. Which is silly. Like, we're going to spend that money. We're going to need the salt. We're going to, okay, we're choosing not to spend $75,000 worth of canopy, but we're probably going to end up doing the work anyway because we're going to have a really windy storm and the trees are going to lose a lot of branches, and we're going to end up doing the cleanup work, so you're going to pay for it on the back end instead of the front end. And that's hopefully no one actually gets injured in the process. So like that $300,000 probably ends up getting consumed in the budget that we originally saw.
Right, and that's what I'm saying. I'd like to see it consumed in the budget. I don't want to pass a budget where we've carved it back with maybe unrealistic expectations about our needs and then sit with this overage of 300. I'd like to see the money go back to the overtime and to the tree canopy and the other decisions that we made, 2 weeks ago or a month ago, so that it's real, it's more real, but just.
I mean, isn't that the budget we saw 3 weeks or a month ago? So just what, that millage?
Well, there's some changes that I think we agreed to tonight, like the credit card fee takes, helps out quite a bit.
What's the millage that we saw 3 weeks ago, less Surrey services and plus the credit card fee then?
Oh, boy. I could dig up my old packet. Bill's looking.
He just does this to put on a show. He can do it.
I'm being,
he can.
I've got it on really good authority that it was about 3.5%.
That was with the credit card fee added and without
No.
Surrey services?
No, that was what it was.
That was before credit card fee, it was before this carving, and that was what led us to ask staff to go back and look at it again. Because the millage had gotten to 3.5% to cover the budget. There we go.
There we go. Yeah, so it was the 3.5%, which included everything that you see on that screen.
And added up to $551,000, basically, short the 14 or whatever.
Yeah, we were also looking at a little bit higher deficit number in the baseline at the 206. So I think between, the 3.5% with all these different moving parts would get this probably really close to zero when we incorporate back the overtime and some of the reductions that we built in tonight.
So this, but that what we're looking at now had already contemplated to flat the request from the community organizations. We did not include increases, right?
No, this
And then
inc-
there was some that that had the increase just for library. Oh.
Library
But
and the arts
wasn't there also, didn't we reduce fire since this?
No, in every version of the budget that we've looked at, we have not incorporated any increases for the
Okay,
fire.
understood.
Yeah, for all the reasons that we talked about then. There's some things that we're working through with them
That's
to try to, yeah.
And 3.5% was roughly, you told me this, and I just can't remember, how much to the average or median homeowner? $50.
Yeah, so 47.
And the 3.5 effect on the, that other sheet we were looking at? I think you just put in millage for like the $20 increase to the family, not for the 3.5, that would be the 47. Yeah, on this sheet, if you do a 3.5 millage, what's our bottom line? Is that it? So, yeah, so 3.5 would have us over 600,000 surplus. But you'd be putting back in
Yeah,
the carve-outs.
just speaking from the perspective of the work that went into this, the introduction of the credit card fee to the conversation came at the cost of no tax increase.
Yes.
It was never, when we were having our internal discussions, it was never contemplated with both.
That's right.
I mean, the points that the treasurer brought up, and, you know, those are the ones that we talk about too. So, just wanted to put that out there.
Oh, it's 125.
So if we did the tax increase at 3.5 and no credit card, no change to credit cards, we're still $500,000. 486.
Yeah.
That's at 1.5.
That's at 3.5 and no credit card fees.
Sorry.
Right. His point was that the credit card fees came in after we asked you to try to zero us out, so with no tax increase, so we wouldn't do both. Or we could,
At least
but
that's,
we would have a
that
lot
was
to
the
play
thought
with.
process on our end when making these different presentations.
Yeah. But like, you creatively brought us something that we hadn't considered before, so, it changed the conversation.
Oh, I think it might have been me. Sorry. Or I made a noise. Sorry about that. Instead of the millage going up, though, when you do the credit card fees, that's like raising the taxes. And on average, that's going to be a higher number.
Not if you sent a check.
Unless you send a check. Thank you.
No tax increase?
Want to make a proposal?
Let me introduce a thought. You can do the credit card fee outside of the budget. Don't do it now. Let's suppose you have a storm, you need more salt, or you need more overtime, or you're running into a problem. that can be something that's implemented partway through the year. In a separate resolution, put in a credit card fee to cut costs and balance the budget.
I love that plan.
Good thinking, Ken.
So that,
Thank
but
you.
that's contemplating that there would be a millage increase, a tax increase, no credit card fee added yet, and if we don't quite make what we need, we reconsider credit card fee.
Which would be about, if you split the difference between the millage increase that we would need with the credit card fee and the millage increase we need without the credit card fee, that's about 3%. Because with the credit card fee, it's 2%. Without the credit card fee, it's 3.5%.
With a very comfortable surplus.
Yeah, but that's a surplus.
That's showing no credit card fee. And what's the percentage you've got showing now, Bill? That's the 3.5?
This is the 3.5, yes.
This is 3.5, no credit card fee. We've got almost $500,000.
This is where we started.
That's maybe too high by way of surplus. I like money
But
in the bank.
this is where we
but-
started.
Right, so maybe we do
So
A
without the
lower-
library getting anything and with less salt and, yeah.
Yes, those are the deltas
Yeah.
versus from the November 11th meeting to tonight.
Oh, this is still no overtime, this is still no
No
salt,
salt.
this
Well-
is 75,000 less for trees, this is,
Library not getting anything.
Yes.
Right, so you're asking him to go back to the original recommendation, essentially. Yeah.
we asked,
Well, with some found revenues that were just estimated and now could be confirmed.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
and
it's a
those-
little bit better picture.
Yeah, and those we would keep in no matter what. The interest revenue, the grants, that'll stay in.
But that 110, well, we've decided on Surrey because they didn't even apply. So that 75 there goes
Yeah.
back to, that's overtime.
Yeah, and we could put the overtime numbers back in. Oops, I keep doing that, sorry. I mean, I can't do it live here because this is part of the system, but I mean, the 75,000 we could zero out for the trees, so that puts the trees back at 400,000.
So just so I don't have to keep repeating it, there's no appetite if we need 110,000 during the year to use, to pull from the 500,000 that we are over the 25%.
Well, other than the
threshold.
credit card fee, that would be what we would have to do. I mean, can't pull it out of thin air, so we would have to take it out of that unless we did Ken's plan of introducing at the time we start to go red,
Yeah,
a credit card fee.
I'm not a big fan of doing that mid-year. Like, you're having a crisis, you're saying, well, now we're coming for your money.
It's not a crisis, we have $500,000 in the fund.
Well, if we're pulling the, if we're doing credit cards mid-year, like.
Of course, correct.
We're having the conversation now, like, I think either we start it now, or to me, it's not an option. I mean, it's an option that I wouldn't support. I mean, when are you gonna do that? Like, so in like May or June, if kids are in camp, are you just gonna do it like mid-camp? Like, we're now gonna increase it 2.5% on you, mid-camp?
No, they will have already paid. So their credit card would have already been run without a fee if they're already in camp. Hey, can you speak, Bill or Bob, can you speak to the health of our organization when it comes to our rating, that we're not quite at AAA yet? Doesn't the fund have a lot to do with that?
A significant amount, yes. And I'll get us going. Bob, you could fill in any blanks that I might miss. So most recently, we got a credit opinion from Moody's as part of the facility bonds. That analysis includes all of the rating ratios that Moody's uses to grade municipalities on and set the ultimate rating. When it comes to Radnor, I go kind of line by line. So they have categories. They have an economy category, financial performance category, institutional framework category, which I think if Moody's was here and being honest, they would tell you that's kind of the behind the curtain, we don't really know, a little bit of we feel good about you number, but it's not really based on actual math. Then there's a leverage calculation. So in terms of economy, our resident income ratio and our full per capita ratio are both at AAA levels. As good as they come. But on the economic growth metric, we actually measure at a negative 1.3%, which in their rating methodology puts us at an A credit rating. So that speaks to the importance of the economic vibrancy of Radnor and how it relates back to the township's finances. The other two areas where we were not graded as strong, the long-term liabilities ratio and the fixed cost ratio, both of those compare long-term liabilities as well as fixed costs to our income and fund balance. So it's a combination of the income and fund balance. If we're holding income flat and decreasing fund balance, that's going to negatively impact that ratio. In both cases, we were rated at an A. So those are the three areas where we struggle in. Two of them we have control over based on our income and fund balance portion of that ratio.
I guess that, Jake, I asked that question because, I mean, that would give me pause to be dipping into our revenue fund mid-year because we didn't budget appropriately at the beginning of the year. So I have always thought that that should be really protected. I know that we were so grateful it was there during COVID. Maybe I've got some PTSD, but I'm always just afraid that we've got another big thing coming around the pike. We also, I mean, it goes to, we have no capital funds. So all of our capital improvements are coming through bonds, and we do better when our rating is higher. And so we spend less money for money when we have a better Moody's rating, correct?
That is correct. I think the bigger impact of those ratios, though, is that the amount of debt we carry factors into that fixed cost number. So the higher that number without revenue to offset it negatively impacts the ratio. So in my opinion, what that speaks to is a balancing between issuing debt and then paying for capital with current resources is a way to maximize that ratio.
Thank you for explaining that. I would not have been able to, but that's why I think we have to be cautious about what we use the revenue fund for.
So we have a 25% threshold. It sounds like we're saying that number is too low.
It might be, yeah. It's when that policy was adopted 10 or so years ago, maybe a little bit longer than that. It was meant to be a floor, and while we're digging into the details of it, 15% is supposed to be the baseline fund balance policy floor, and then if business taxes exceed a certain percentage of our revenue, it adds another 10% to it. So really, it's the second part of that fund balance policy that maybe needs revisited. So maybe the 10% should be a little bit higher if we're going to lean more and more on the business tax side to operate.
And so hypothetically, if we borrowed, took $150,000, $200,000 from that fund, what would be the impact to our rating?
Yeah, well, at those dollar amounts, I don't know if there'd be a meaningful impact. What Moody's would want to see, though, is that in the next budget cycle, we're making corrective decisions to either restore that or fix it going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think we had discussed when we had to hit it so hard in COVID and not knowing about whether or not we were going to get some of the PPP money, you know, we were going to be scratching back over the next few years with tax increases. So, you know, it's sort of, do we want to do incremental tax increases like 2%? To help, to make sure that we're healthy enough, that we don't ever have to come back and do a 10% tax increase because we miscalculated.
So I didn't say this with my full throat before because I think we got sidetracked into some questions about what numbers were included or not. But it's now 9:30. I'm going to propose a 3% increase, which threads the needle between 3.5 and 2.5, which I'm back to thinking funds us where we were planning to be, incorporating the changes that we're making today with respect to the credit card and Surrey services, and the found money that we have that's more legitimately included in the budget, but not including the reductions that we had for overtime, salt, trees that were what I'm just going to call funny money.
He's typing.
Is that a formal motion?
That is my motion.
I'll second it.
Can we see it?
Well, I apologize. This is well, the short answer is no. We could show you everything that, in terms of how it impacts the millage, elimination of the credit card fee for now, the elimination of the $75,000 reduction of the tree maintenance program. What I can't show you are the inclusions of these amounts here for the overtime and the salt.
But I kind of like.
But what we do know is that there's, you know, $80,000 surplus that when I put those numbers back into the operating budget, that's going to be, you know, closer to $250,000 versus the $333 that you see. And funny money hurts.
I also saw your face when you were presenting it, though, so I stand by my term.
Yeah, this took out the credit card fee, right? Yeah, no, I like the credit card fee. I want 2 and a credit card fee, 2% and a credit card fee. Let's make him type as much as he can.
I could live with that.
I mean, if you could get me a guesstimate on that one.
Bill, we'd actually raised that. We estimated another 15 in there, so it was 125.5. Yep.
So we're pretty much landing in roughly the same spot, about 30,000 less, but still sufficient.
I like that one. So we have a motion on the table.
Second.
No, the first motion we haven't voted on.
Oh, I just moved to amend that to 2.
Okay.
And add the credit card.
And add the credit card.
Okay. Can we, this is terrible.
And I'll second the amended motion to 3 with the credit card. Is that it? 2 with the credit card.
I was 2 with the credit card, but I hadn't finished yet. Oh. I was going to add back 50% of the increases requested by the library, the senior center, and the art center.
I could live with that, too.
Just 50%. Sorry.
Yeah,
That doesn't
specific
really
to
make
the senior center, the 8,400,
I think
Oh, yeah,
we're
that
covering that.
was it. We're covering
Yeah.
it already. You're right. Sorry. I was art center and library.
Library doesn't need the other 20,000. They got my daughter.
She can be your slush fund.
Sounds like you got a big donor talking over here.
All right. Can I make that a formal motion? As amended. Okay.
And you said, I saw you typing that you're adding back, you're estimating that's about 80?
Yeah, it was 80 for the public works overtime and salt, add another 20, so 100,000 for I forgot about the 20,000 for the day camp.
Yeah, so
So
we're
it's-
really, now we're really
25.
tight.
We're at
about 100.
177.
177.
Yeah.
That's good. I like that.
Okay.
How do you feel about that? He's not happy, but he's smiling. All right, so we have a motion. Does everybody get it? So it's the credit card fee starting now, 2% increase in millage, adding back 50% of the increase for the library and the arts center, adding back your salt and your overtime, getting rid of the increase in day camp revenue except for via credit card. Anything else?
Second.
There you go. We got a motion and it's seconded. Any other discussion? Any public comment? Shoo. I was getting worried you hadn't commented all night.
I'm trying to get rid of my reputation as the curmudgeon. Of course, as a senior, a 2% increase is a lot because you're raising the sewer fee, if I believe that it's going from $9.75 to $13.30. But this, as a senior, add the credit card fee, because guess what? I pay by check. That's how I figure out my income tax, because I have my check register and I have highlighted every charitable, every tax, every medical bill. So in a way, if people will write a check and either deliver it to the township or put a stamp on it, it will prevent seniors who I'm concerned about. Because yes, we're getting a 2.5% increase, but they're raising Medicare Part B much higher. So seniors aren't getting an increase for Social Security. And as a person who the government tried to take away my Social Security, yes, they did. 5 months, Mary Gay Scanlon got it back for me. But it was, I'm serious about this. I thought I would have to commit suicide because I'd lost my income. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any other staff comment? Nope. All right. We're going to put it to a vote. It's an introduction, so it's going to come up again. All in favor? Aye. Hey, we got a unanimous vote. All right. I got to find myself here. I'm on item C, I believe. Ordinance 2024-11, which is also an introduction, adopting the 2025 sanitary sewer rate. What? Oh.
I'm sorry, did we? I apologize. Agenda item B, I just want to make sure that we're plugging in the right number for the introduction of the ordinance for the budget, which I think,
2%.
yeah, so the ordinance doesn't contemplate percentages. I wanna say it
You
out
got to do
loud.
the actual millage, sorry.
Yeah, so we're looking at it up on the screen, so I'm getting a millage of 2.4265 for the township operational / capital tax levy. You add the .0587 for a total of 2.4852 mils.
.0487 is on the screen at
No, I'm
2%
sorry.
increase.
This is the, over here. on-
Oh, sorry, I
yeah.
was looking on the right.
Yeah, so this would be the sum. So we'd be at a total millage of 2.4852,
Yes.
which, just double check the math here to make sure.
0.587?
Yeah,
Yeah, what are the column headers?
He's in the millage calculator.
Make sure. Yeah. 0.0487. Yeah,
That's
so
the
this first
increase.
column's the only one that's really changing.
And what's the header on those columns? Okay, operation, got it.
Yeah, we've added, yeah, so years ago, we started adding this special needs column to capture increases to specific items. 19, it was OPEB, then fire company. Then we cut it in half because of the reassessment, and it's been pretty much the same amount since.
Got it.
So that's just an internal accounting way of trying to segregate the millage into different buckets. But for legislative purposes, these two have always been combined into one number, and then we report the .0587 separately. Yeah. So just
Yep.
circling back, the township operational / capital tax levy will be 2.4265, which matches what's highlighted on the screen. We'll add the .0587, which is not changing, for a total of 2.4852, which represents a 2% increase over the 2024 or a .0487 mils.
Great.
I'll believe you.
It's all there. It's all in the, yeah, the math's all there.
Doing it live, under pressure.
All
Thank
right,
you.
that was good. All right,
All right, so
you've
John,
got
you know
what you
to
need there.
advertise.
Okay to move on? Okay. So I read it. It's ordinance 2024-11, an introduction of the sanitary sewer rate for 2025. All right, who gets this one? Mr. Tate, is that you?
Thank you, Madam President. Yes, I'll take these, the sewer rent rate. Just to clarify, the fee being proposed is a 3.9% increase. The current rate is $12.62 per 1,000 gallons of water, and we're proposing to increase that to $13.11 per 1,000 gallons of water consumed. As you can see on the screen here, it would generate some additional revenue, approximately $330,000, and for a total of a little over $9.25 million. The majority of our expense, as we talk about each year, is our downflow cost, what's payable to RHM. What we see for the 2024 year-to-date is just 3/4 of payments. So we're just about to make our fourth quarter payment, which will be reflected. And this, so it'll be just over $6 million. Next year's rate is an estimate based on information we've received from RHM, an increase of about 4 to 5%. So we're projecting approximately $6.4 million there. And then that leaves us, after paying for some staffing and contractual services, there is capital outlay. So Mr. Norsini will have enough to begin the televising program as promoted by the Business Advisory Committee, a little over $500,000. So that's what a 3.9% increase will help provide for 2025.
Thank you. Any commissioner questions, comments? Nope. So it's interesting to me that you don't just pass along the 5% or whatever you said that the sewer authority, the RHM, is going to pass on to us. Is it because it's part of an amalgamation of costs and? So you end up at 3.9 or whatever we ended up, is that how you got there?
That's exactly correct.
Okay.
The other large component I omitted to mention was the debt service.
Mhm.
So over time, hopefully as that diminishes, as we can see it has slightly from last year, that's one of the costs that will vary.
Okay. I didn't get a motion. I need a motion.
So moved.
And a second. Second. All right. If any public participation on this issue? Seeing none, no further comment. Let's take a vote on ordinance 2024-11. All in favor? Aye. So we'll see that one again next meeting. Then we have item D, resolution 2024-130, adopting the 2025 stormwater fee. Mr. Tate, I gather this one's you as well.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. Again, proposing no fee increase, keeping the rate at $29 per unit, generates the anticipated revenue of just over about $1,050,000. A significant portion of that cost goes towards the debt service on our 2022 bonds, a little over $500,000 there. And what's not shown, well, actually, see, the surplus is $439,000 and change. That money will be utilized for capital projects. We have not specifically outlined just above this under capital outlay, because there are projects in design, some, moving to construction. But Mr. Norsini will know that this is the amount of money he has to work with, and he'll dedicate that to the most pressing projects and those currently in design, ready to go to construction. So that will be further allocated throughout the year to those specific projects.
And if I could just add on real quickly, when we talk about the last couple of years and the stormwater funding plan that the board adopted back in 2022, which contemplated the use of a combination of the fund balance that had built up in that fund over time, in addition to a $10 million initial borrowing. You could see here, these are the amounts that we have spent on capital. And of course, I got it on full screen mode, so we're not going to see the sum. But so these are the amounts that we've shown or invested into the stormwater system. So that's 14.17. So $14.2 million has been invested into our stormwater infrastructure in the last 3 years, thanks to that funding plan. So, there are a lot of things that we aren't doing, but this is one of the areas, thanks to the commitment that the board made a few years ago to attack. So we've invested quite a bit into this area. And as Mr. Tate just mentioned, this 439 that's pretty much unappropriated for next year will go in towards setting up the next round of projects coming down the pike.
Thank you. All right, I did not get a motion on this one. Could I have a motion?
Second.
Jeez, thanks. All in favor, or is there any discussion, any public participation? Sorry. Nope. All right, let's take a vote. All in favor of Resolution 2024-130? It's
Aye.
unanimous. Great. All right, that ends our formal agenda. We have reports of board liaisons. Anybody? No, I just wanted to say that we do have an opening on the Board of Health, just to advertise that to the large viewing audience at 10 o'clock at night. Any new business?
No, thank you.
Any old business? No, I just want to reassure the audience that's watching that we are continuing to negotiate with the Wayne Presbyterian Church, and they should be on the next agenda. Any final public participation? Seeing none, after saying Happy Thanksgiving to all, could I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We're adjourned.